The auctioneer's gavel came down with a crack that split the March afternoon like thunder over empty prairie. $50. And just like that, I owned 160 acres of land that nobody else wanted. I was 18 years old. I had $13 left in my pocket, and I was standing in a county courthouse in Clearwater, Wyoming, staring at a piece of paper that said I now owned a place the locals called the Dead Woman's Ranch. But I should start at the beginning, because this story doesn't make sense unless you understand where I came from. Unless you understand what it means to have nothing, to be nothing, to belong to no one. My name is Cassidy Tate, and for the first 16 years of my life, I didn't know I had a name that meant anything at all. I remember the taste of that last morning at St. Catherine's home. Instant oatmeal gone cold. Powdered milk mixed too thin. The same breakfast I'd eaten for as long as I could remember in the same gray cafeteria at the same scratched table by the window that looked out onto a parking lot in Casper where social workers came and went, taking some kids and leaving others. I was always one of the others. That Tuesday in March was different. I was 16 years old in the foster system. 16 is a cliff. Too old to be adopted, too young to matter. The state would keep a file on me for 2 more years, but the chances of anyone taking me home had dropped to almost zero the day I turned 13. Mrs. Henderson found me after breakfast. She was a tired woman with tired eyes and a tired smile, and she'd been running St. Catherine's for 22 years. I don't think she was unkind. I think she was worn down by too many kids and not enough miracles. "Cassidy," she said, and her voice had that particular softness that meant bad news. "Come to my office, please." I followed her down the hallway I'd walked 1,000 times, past the bulletin board with its faded posters about hygiene and homework, past the door to the rec room where a television played shows nobody watched, past the window that looked out on that same parking lot where I'd watched other kids leave with families that wanted them, families that chose them, families that loved them enough to sign papers and take them home. In her office, Mrs. Henderson handed me a manila envelope and a small cardboard box. "These are your mother's effects," she said. "We've held them in storage since you arrived. You're old enough now to have them." I stared at the box. It was small enough to hold in one hand. 12 years in this place, and this was all that remained of the woman who'd given birth to me. "What about my file?" I asked. "Is there anything else about my family?" Mrs. Henderson shook her head. "Your mother died in a car accident when you were 4 months old. No father listed on the birth certificate. No known relatives. I'm sorry, Cassidy. There's nothing else." She gave me $180 in an envelope, state allowance, enough to last maybe 2 weeks if I was careful. "Good luck," she said. That was it. That was goodbye. 16 years old and the system was done with me. I opened the box that night in a bus station in Casper. I'd bought a ticket heading west because west felt like possibility, like distance, like something other than the gray walls and gray lives I was leaving behind. Inside the box, I found 3 things. A silver locket, tarnished almost black with photos inside. One showed a young woman, maybe 16, dark hair, dark eyes, holding a baby. The other showed the same woman, older by maybe a year, standing on a porch somewhere, hand on her pregnant belly, smiling in a way that looked almost defiant, like she was daring the camera to capture something she wasn't ready to give. The second item was a folded piece of paper that turned out to be my birth certificate. Mother, Laura Tate. Father, unknown. Place of birth, Clearwater, Wyoming. Date of birth, October 12, 1999. The paper was worn soft from handling, like someone had looked at it many times, folded and unfolded it, traced the letters of my name with gentle fingers. The third item was another photograph, this one a Polaroid faded soft around the edges. The same young woman stood in front of a white farmhouse, one hand shading her eyes from the sun. Behind her, the house rose against a sky so blue it hurt to look at. A porch wrapped around the front. A barn sat in the distance, and all around, fields stretched to a horizon that seemed to go on forever. On the back, someone had written in careful cursive, "Mama's Place." Triple Creek Ranch, Clearwater, Wyoming, 1999. I turned the photograph over and looked at the woman again. At my mother. I had her eyes, I realized. Dark brown, almost black in certain light. I had her chin, too. That stubborn jut that Mrs. Henderson used to call your difficult face. But I didn't have her smile. I didn't have her ease in front of the camera. I didn't have whatever it was that let someone stand in the sun and look at the world like it owed them something good. I had nothing, except now I had a place, a name. Clearwater, Wyoming, and that was enough to keep moving. The next 2 years are hard to talk about, not because they were especially cruel. I've heard worse stories from other kids who aged out of the system. Girls who ended up on the streets, boys who ended up in prison, lives that spiraled down into darkness before they'd even had a chance to find light. I was luckier than most, but luck isn't the same as easy, and those 2 years taught me things I wish I didn't know. I worked. That was the simple version. I washed dishes in a diner outside Cheyenne until the owner's son cornered me in the storage room, and I had to leave fast, in the middle of a shift, walking out the back door with nothing but my backpack and the clothes on my back. I picked up ranch work near Laramie until the season ended and they didn't need me anymore. I cleaned motel rooms in Rock Springs for 4 months, scrubbing toilets and changing sheets, and pretending not to see the things people left behind. I slept in bus stations when I could afford the ticket to somewhere. I slept in shelters when they had room. I slept behind a laundromat one November, curled against the warm vent, and woke up with frost in my hair and ice on my eyelashes. I was always moving, always looking, because every library I passed I stopped. Every computer with internet access I searched. Clearwater, Wyoming, Tate family, Laura Tate, any combination of words I could think of. For 18 months I found nothing. The town was too small to have much online. The family too ordinary to make news. The past too buried to dig up with simple searches. And then in the public library in Casper, on a computer in the back corner on a Tuesday afternoon in February, I found everything. The records were in the county clerk's archive, digitized but buried in a database nobody ever looked at. Property records, tax documents, death certificates. The bones of a place called Clearwater and a family called Tate. I learned that Clearwater had once been a real town, 800 people at its peak back in the 1950s, a feed store, a church, a school, ranches spreading out in all directions following the creeks until they dried up every summer. Now the population was listed as 589. Most of the young people had left. The school had closed in 2003. The church held services once a month when the circuit preacher made his rounds, but the property records still existed. And in those records I found her. Margaret Tate, known as me. 160 acres, Section 12, Township 4 North. Primary residence, 1 farmhouse, 1 barn, various outbuildings. Property acquired 1955. Owner deceased January 2015, age 82. Me Tate had been my grandmother. She'd owned the ranch in that photograph. She'd lived there for 60 years. And according to the county records, she died 3 years before I started searching. The property was listed as abandoned. Taxes unpaid since 2015. Estimated debt, $3,200. And at the bottom of the record, a notice. Property scheduled for county auction. Date, March 15, 2018. Minimum bid, $50. I looked at the calendar in the corner of the screen. It was March 12th. I had 3 days. I hitched a ride with a rancher hauling hay to Clearwater. His name was Earl and he didn't ask questions, which I appreciated. He let me out at the intersection of 2 dirt roads and pointed toward a cluster of buildings in the distance. Town's that way, he said. What's left of it? He paused, looked at me with something like concern. You got people there." "Not yet," I said. He shook his head but didn't argue. Just handed me a bottle of water and drove off, dust rising behind his truck like smoke. I started walking. The road was gravel turning to dirt, winding through fields that had gone wild with neglect. Brown grass waved in the wind like an ocean. The sky stretched overhead bigger than any sky I'd seen in my life. I'd grown up in cities and institutions, in places where the horizon was always blocked by buildings or fences or walls. Here there was nothing between me and the edge of the world. It should have felt freeing. Instead, it felt terrifying. Because with every step closer to town, I understood what I was walking into. Not a homecoming, not a reunion, just another place where I didn't belong, trying to claim something I had no right to claim. Clearwater appeared slowly, like it was reluctant to exist. First a grain elevator rising against the sky, then a water tower with faded letters, then buildings scattered along what must have been Main Street. I counted as I walked. 7 buildings total, 4 of them boarded up, windows broken, paint peeling, roofs sagging. A feed store anchored one end, its sign weathered but still legible. A diner sat at the other end, smoke rising from a chimney. In between, a post office that doubled as the county clerk, a church with a small cemetery behind it, and 2 empty storefronts that stared at each other across cracked pavement. The whole town looked like a place that was slowly forgetting it existed, like it was waiting for permission to die. I found the county clerk's office in the post office building. A woman sat behind a desk, gray hair pulled back, reading glasses on a chain, sorting through mail with the slow deliberation of someone who had all day and nothing urgent to do. She looked up when I walked in, studied me for a moment, then set down the mail. "Help you. I'm here about the auction tomorrow, the Tate property." She sat back in her chair, looked me over more carefully. 18 years old, dirty backpack, clothes that had seen too many laundromats, boots held together with duct tape. Her expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. "You family to me, Tate." She was my grandmother. The woman's face shifted, not quite surprise, something deeper, sadness maybe, or regret. "What's your name?" "Cassidy Tate." Silence. The woman stood up, walked to a filing cabinet, pulled out a folder, brought it back to the desk and opened it carefully. Inside were documents, official papers, a life reduced to property records and tax forms. She ran her finger down a page, stopped, looked up at me. "Me talked about you, not by name, she didn't know your name, but she talked about her granddaughter Laura's baby. Said Laura died in a car accident in Idaho in 2000. Said the baby went into state custody and she spent 15 years trying to find her." She paused. "That was you." I nodded, couldn't trust my voice to work. The woman extended her hand. "I'm Pearl Winters. I've run this office for 30 years. Me was my best friend for 50 of them." She paused. "If me knew you were here, if she knew you'd come home, it would have meant everything to her." "I'm not here to claim family," I said. "I'm just here for the auction." Pearl looked at me for a long moment. Then she pulled out a form and slid it across the desk. "Auctions tomorrow at 10. Courthouse room. You'll need to register. Minimum bid is $50. You have $50. "Yes, ma'am." "Then you can bid. But I should tell you, there's 90 days to pay the back taxes. $3,200. If you can't pay it in 90 days, the county takes the property back and resells it." "I understand." Pearl studied me. "Do you? Because winter out there is brutal. The house has been empty 3 years. Roofs half gone, pipes frozen and burst, no heat, no water, no electricity. Nobody's touched it since me died. It's not livable." "I'll make it work." She shook her head slowly. "Your grandmother used to say the same thing. Stubborn woman, wouldn't quit for anything." She looked at me. I see that runs in the family. The auction took place the next morning in a room that smelled like dust and old wood and decades of small-town bureaucracy. 8 people sat in folding chairs, all of them old enough to be my grandparents, all of them local ranchers come to see if there was anything worth buying. A man in a rumpled suit stood at the front, reading from a clipboard with a voice flat and bored like he'd done this 100 times and expected nothing interesting to happen today. There were 3 properties on the list: an empty lot next to the grain elevator, a collapsed barn on 5 acres, and the Tate Ranch. The first 2 sold fast. $100 here, $75 there. The men in the folding chairs bid without enthusiasm, like they were buying expired groceries out of habit. Then the clerk got to the last item. Tate property, he read. 160 acres, Section 12, farmhouse, barn, outbuildings. Condition as is. Minimum bid $50. He looked up at the room. Anybody? Nobody moved. The clock on the wall ticked. A fly buzzed against the window. One of the old ranchers shifted in his seat and muttered something about bad water and cursed ground. The clerk cleared his throat. $50, he said again. Anyone? I raised my hand. $50. A few people turned to look at me. I saw amusement in their eyes, curiosity. The kind of pity reserved for children who don't know any better. One man in the back row didn't look amused. He was about 60, expensive hat, clean boots, cold eyes the color of ice over water. He watched me raise my hand and something crossed his face. Calculation maybe, or recognition, like he'd been expecting this. $50, the clerk repeated. Do I hear 60? Silence stretched out. The man in the back kept watching me, didn't bid, just watched. Going once. The clerk sounded almost surprised, going twice. The gavel came down. Sold to the young lady for $50. I walked to the front of the room and signed my name on a piece of paper. My hand was shaking, but my signature was clear. Cassidy Tate. The clerk handed me a receipt and a set of keys so rusted they looked like they might crumble in my hand. Congratulations, he said without warmth. You've got 90 days to pay $3,200 in back taxes. Otherwise, the county takes it back. I nodded, took the keys, turned to leave. The man from the back row was standing by the door. Up close he was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a sheepskin coat that probably cost more than I'd made in the last 6 months. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Miss Tate, Roy Dalton, I own the ranch next to yours. Wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood. Thank you. Also wanted to make you an offer, save you some trouble. He pulled a checkbook from his coat. $7,000, cash. Today. You sign over the deed, I'll take care of the taxes, and you can be on a bus to anywhere by tonight. I looked at him. At the cold eyes and the thin smile and the checkbook held out like bait. The property's not for sale, I said. Everything's for sale. It's just a matter of price. Not this. His smile widened, but his eyes went colder. You're 18 years old. You've got no money and winter's coming. That house will kill you before spring. Trust me, I'm doing you a favor. I appreciate the offer, I said, but no. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he put the checkbook away. Your grandmother was stubborn too. Sat out there alone for 60 years, watching everything fall apart around her, refusing every offer I made. He leaned closer. You know what that got her? She died alone. No family, no friends. Nobody even knew she was dead for 3 days. He straightened. That what you want? I want to see my land, I said. He laughed, not a friendly sound. Suit yourself. But when you change your mind, and you will, you know where to find me. He walked past me and out the door. I stood there holding the rusted keys and feeling the weight of what I'd just done settle onto my shoulders like stones. The walk to the ranch took 2 hours. The road turned from pavement to gravel to dirt, winding through fields that had gone wild. Sagebrush and rabbitbrush and brown grass waving in the March wind. In the distance, mountains rose white with snow. Closer in, cottonwood trees lined what must be creeks, their branches still bare but showing the first hints of green. The air smelled like sage and dirt and something clean I couldn't name. Wind maybe, or distance. Or the particular emptiness of places where people used to live but don't anymore. The house appeared first, rising from the prairie like something that had grown there by accident and nobody had bothered to remove. White paint peeled from the clapboards in long curls. The porch sagged on the left side, one post completely gone. 3 windows on the upper floor were dark holes where glass should have been. The roof was the worst. A whole corner had collapsed, leaving a jagged wound that exposed the attic to the sky. Even from a distance, I could see the dark stains, where rain and snow had poured in and rotted everything they touched. Behind the house, a barn leaned at an angle that seemed to defy gravity. Half the roof had caved in. The walls bulged outward like they were exhaling their last breath. The whole structure looked like someone had propped it against the wind and walked away expecting it to fall, but it hadn't yet. Just kept leaning, kept waiting, kept defying the inevitable. And everywhere, the grass had taken over. Chest high in places, covering what might have been a garden, swallowing what might have been a path, reclaiming what people had tried to build. Prairie returning to prairie. Wild things taking back what was always theirs. I stood at the edge of the property for a long time. The wind pushed against my back like a hand trying to guide me forward or warn me away. I thought about turning around. I could walk back to town, sell the keys to someone, maybe even Dalton, take whatever money I could get and keep moving the way I'd been moving for 2 years. Find another diner, another ranch, another motel, another laundromat vent to sleep against. But I'd tried that life already. I knew where it led. Nowhere. It led nowhere. Just an endless circle of temporary places and temporary people and nothing that ever meant anything. I took a breath and walked toward the house. The front door was unlocked. It wasn't even closed all the way. The frame had warped so badly that the door sat at an angle, leaving a gap wide enough for animals to pass through. And they had. The smell hit me first. Mold and rot and mouse droppings and the particular sweet sour stench of abandonment. I pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. The living room might have been beautiful once. High ceilings, a stone fireplace taking up most of one wall, windows on 3 sides that would have let in light. Now plaster hung from the ceiling in long sheets like peeling skin. The floor was soft and treacherous with water damage. A family of something had built a nest in the corner, leaving debris scattered across what remained of a rug. I moved through the room slowly, testing each step before I trusted it with my weight. The kitchen was worse. Counters crumbled, sink hanging loose from the wall, rust staining everything below it. Linoleum curled up at the edges, revealing rotted subfloor beneath. Cabinets with doors hanging by single hinges. A table still standing but covered in mouse droppings and bird feathers. I moved into what must have been a bedroom. Mattress reduced to springs and mold. Dresser with drawers pulled out and emptied. Wallpaper peeling in long strips. Window broken, glass scattered across the floor like stars. Bathroom better not to describe. But under all the damage, under all the rot and neglect and years of weather and animals and entropy, I could see the bones. Solid walls, strong beams, a foundation that had held for almost 100 years. Good bones, I said out loud, just to hear something besides the wind. My voice sounded small and hopeful and stupid, but I kept exploring. In what had been a back room, I found the first sign that someone had lived here. Really lived here, not just existed. A bookshelf still standing with books still on it, swollen with water but intact. A rocking chair by the window, its cushion chewed by mice but its frame solid. A basket of yarn, the colors faded but recognizable, and on the wall, photographs. I approached them carefully, afraid they might crumble at my touch. They were old, black and white mostly, the frame simple wood. A man in overalls standing next to a tractor. A woman in a flower dress holding a baby. Two children running toward the camera, mouths open in laughter, joy frozen in silver gelatin. And one photograph in a silver frame, placed at the center of the wall like everything else revolved around it. A young woman standing in front of this house, one hand shading her eyes from the sun. My mother. I reached out and touched the glass. It was cool under my fingers, real. She had stood in this room. She had looked at this photograph. She had been here, had breathed this air, had walked these floors before they rotted, had known this place when it was whole. I sank down onto the floor and cried. Not gentle tears. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep, that you've been holding back for years, that finally breaks through because you're alone and tired and overwhelmed, and you've just found the first real connection to family you've ever had. And it's in a house that's falling apart, in a town that's dying, in a life that makes no sense. I cried until I couldn't breathe, until my throat hurt and my eyes burned and my chest ached. And then I cried some more. When I finally stopped, the sun was setting. Golden light slanted through the broken windows, turning the dust motes into something almost beautiful. I stood up, wiped my face, looked around at the ruin I'd bought for $50. This is mine, I said to the empty room. This is mine and I'm not giving it up. That night I slept in the truck. It was a 1984 Ford pickup, rusted and dusty but somehow still whole, parked in what had once been a garage behind the house. The keys were in the ignition. When I turned them, the engine coughed twice and died. But the cab was dry. The seats were cracked but not moldy. And when I curled up with my jacket as a blanket and my backpack as a pillow, it felt more like safety than anything I'd known in years. The cold woke me before dawn. March in Wyoming is not kind to people sleeping in dead trucks. My breath came out in clouds. My fingers were stiff and clumsy. When I finally got the door open and stepped outside, the frost crunched under my boots like broken glass. But the sky. I had never seen a sky like that. Pink and orange and gold spreading from the horizon like fire. The field stretched out around me, silver with frost, the grass bent and frozen and beautiful. And for a moment, I forgot the cold. I forgot the broken house and the impossible taxes and the 90 days I couldn't waste. I just stood there and watched the sun rise on my land. My land. The words felt strange in my mouth, foreign, like a language I was only beginning to learn, but I practiced them anyway. Standing there in the frozen grass, my breath rising like smoke, I said it out loud. My land. I went back to the house as soon as there was enough light to see. I needed to understand what I was dealing with, how bad the damage really was, what could be saved and what couldn't, and I needed to find something. I didn't know what yet, but standing in Me's room the night before, looking at her photographs and her books and her yarn, I'd felt it. The sense that she'd left something behind, some message, some clue, some reason to believe this wasn't impossible. I started in the barn. It was dangerous, I knew that. The whole structure could come down at any moment. But if there was a cellar, if there was storage, if there was anything hidden, it would be there. The main structure leaned so far east I was afraid to breathe near it. Half the roof had fallen in, creating a mountain of debris that blocked most of the interior. The smell of rotting hay and old manure made my eyes water, but the floor was still there. Wooden planks, warped and filthy but solid when I tested them with my weight. I started in the corner farthest from the collapsed section, feeling along the edges of each plank, looking for a seam, a hinge, anything that suggested a door or a hatch or a way down. It took me 2 hours. The cold made my fingers clumsy. The dust made me cough. Twice I thought I heard the building groan and I froze, waiting for it to collapse, but it held. The hatch was in the second stall, hidden under a layer of dirt and old hay so thick it looked like part of the floor. I found it by accident when my boot caught on a metal ring. I thought it was a piece of broken equipment at first, but when I brushed away the dirt, I saw it was attached to something. A door, heavy, wooden, old. I pulled. The door was so heavy my arms burned with the effort. Rust fought against every inch, but slowly it came up, hinges screaming, wood scraping against wood, until finally it stood open and beneath it, wooden stairs descended into darkness. I used my phone for light. The battery was almost dead, but I didn't care. I had to see. The room below was small, maybe 8 feet by 10 feet. The walls were concrete, surprisingly dry. Shelves lined 3 sides, and the shelves were lined with supplies. Canned food, some of it probably still good, tools wrapped in oiled cloth, seeds in sealed jars, a lantern, matches in a waterproof container, a first aid kit, water purification tablets, everything you'd need to survive if the world ended, or if you had nowhere else to go. On a small table against the far wall sat a metal footlocker, military issue, heavy gauge steel combination lock. The lock was broken. Someone had smashed it years ago. I lifted the lid with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Inside, I found everything. The money came first. $1,600 in cash, mostly 20s and 10s, bundled with rubber bands that crumbled when I touched them. More money than I'd had in my entire life. Enough to pay the first tax installment. Enough to buy time. Beneath the money, letters. 67 letters, each in its own envelope, each addressed to Laura Tate at different addresses across the West. Boise, Idaho, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, Denver, Colorado, Phoenix, Arizona, all of them stamped the same way. Return to sender, address unknown, unable to forward. I opened one at random. The handwriting was careful, shaky in places like it had been written by someone whose hands didn't work quite right anymore. My dearest Laura, it began, I don't know where you are. I don't know if you'll ever read this. But I'm writing anyway because somewhere in the world you're alive, and I need you to know I forgive you. Whatever happened, whatever made you leave, it doesn't matter. Come home. Please come home. Your mother, me. The letter was dated April 2008, 8 years after my mother died. Me had still been writing to her, still hoping, still waiting. I found more. Letters from 2000, 2005, 2010, 2015. A whole archive of hope and grief and stubborn love. And beneath the letters, birthday cards, 18 of them, one for each year of my life. The first one was pink with hand-drawn flowers along the edges. Inside, in that same careful handwriting, happy first birthday, my dearest Cassidy. I don't know where you are. I don't know if you'll ever read this. But I made you a card anyway because somewhere in the world you're turning one today. And I want you to know that someone is thinking of you. Your great-grandmother, me. She'd known my name. Somehow she'd known. And every year she'd made a card. Every year she'd marked my birthday even though she'd never met me, even though she had no idea where I was, even though I might never see them. I opened the last card. It was dated October 2014, 4 months before she died. The handwriting was barely legible now, shaking so badly the letters ran together. Happy 18th birthday, Cassidy. You're a woman now, old enough to find your way home. I've left everything for you. The money, the letters, the land, it's all waiting. Please come home. I don't have much time left, but I'll hold on as long as I can. I love you. I've always loved you. Grandma me. She died 3 months after writing that card. She'd held on as long as she could, but I hadn't come in time. I pressed the card to my chest and felt something break inside me. Not a bad break, the kind that lets light in. At the bottom of the footlocker, beneath the letters and cards, I found a leather-bound journal. The leather was worn soft with handling. The pages were yellowed with age. and on the first page in bold black ink, someone had written William Tate, 1st Cavalry Division, Vietnam, 1968. My grandfather's journal. I turned the pages carefully. The first entries were from Vietnam, combat reports, weather observations, the kinds of things soldiers write when they need to make sense of chaos. Then entries from after the war, coming home, marrying me, starting the ranch, learning to live with what he'd seen. And then, dated 1973, an entry that made my breath stop. Today I drilled 3 test wells on the property, hired a geologist from the university to help. What we found is remarkable. Beneath this land, 3 creeks converge underground: Cottonwood, Willow, and Sage. They meet in a massive aquifer, a natural reservoir of water so large it could supply the entire valley for 100 years, maybe more. The geologist said it's one of the largest artesian systems in the state. He said if we charge water rights, we could make millions. I told him no. This water doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the land, to the people who need it, to the families who have lived here for generations. I'll protect it, but I won't sell it. I kept reading. More entries about the water, about keeping it secret, about refusing offers from neighbors who wanted to buy the land, and then an entry from 1980 that made my hands shake. Roy Dalton came by today, offered me $100,000 for the ranch. I refused. He knows about the water. I don't know how, but he knows. He said I'd regret refusing. He said his family has owned most of this valley for 3 generations and they don't like competition. I told him the water isn't for sale and neither is my land. He smiled, said we'd see about that. I've heard stories about Roy Dalton, about families who refused to sell to him. The Crows in '85. The Johnsons in '92, heart attacks, car accidents, always convenient, always ruled natural causes. I need to protect me and Laura, but I don't know how to fight a man like that. The entries continued. More offers from Dalton, more refusals, more veiled threats. And then the final entry, dated January 14, 1999. Chest pains today. Went to the doctor. He said my heart is fine, strong as a horse, but I don't believe him. I saw Roy Dalton at the feed store yesterday. He was watching me, smiling, like he knows something I don't. I'm afraid, not for myself, for me and Laura. If something happens to me, if I die suddenly, don't believe it's natural. Dalton wants this water. He'll kill for it. He already tried once with the Crow family. Maybe he's trying again with me. If you're reading this and I'm dead, it wasn't natural causes. Dalton wants the water. He'll kill for it. He already tried once. 3 weeks after that entry, according to the death certificate Pearl had shown me, William Tate died of a sudden heart attack. Age 54. No autopsy. Cause of death ruled natural. I sat on the concrete floor of the bunker, surrounded by letters and money and my grandfather's warnings, and understood something fundamental. This wasn't just about land. This wasn't just about taxes or survival or proving I could make it on my own. This was about water, about power, about a man who'd been willing to kill for control of something that should have belonged to everyone. And he'd won. He'd killed my grandfather. He'd driven my mother away. He'd waited for my grandmother to die alone. And now he was waiting for me to fail so he could finally take what he'd wanted for almost 40 years. I closed the journal carefully, put it back in the footlocker with the letters and cards, counted the money. $1,600, enough for the first tax payment, enough to buy time. I climbed back up the stairs into the gray light of afternoon. The barn still leaned, the house still sagged, the grass still grew wild. But now I knew what I was fighting for, not just the land, the water beneath it. The legacy my grandfather had tried to protect, the family Dalton had destroyed. I walked back to the house and stood in Me's room, looking at the photographs on the wall, at my grandfather in his uniform, at my grandmother young and hopeful, at my mother pregnant and scared, at all the people who'd loved this place and fought for it and lost. I'm not losing, I said to the empty room. I'm not giving up. I'm not selling. I don't care how long it takes or how hard it gets. This is mine, and I'm keeping it. Outside in the distance, I heard a truck engine. I went to the window and looked out. A black Ford pickup was circling the property line, slow and deliberate. Roy Dalton, watching, waiting, probably wondering if I'd found the bunker yet, probably wondering how long before I gave up. I watched him circle once, twice, 3 times. Then I turned away from the window and got to work. There was a house to fix, a winter to survive, a war to fight, and I had 90 days to figure out how to win. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't alone. I had my grandmother's love in those birthday cards. I had my grandfather's warnings in his journal. I had my mother's sacrifice in her choice to leave. And I had something else. Something Roy Dalton didn't know about yet. I had the truth. About the water. About the murders. About everything he'd done. And truth, my grandfather had written in one of his last entries, is the only weapon that matters in the end. I just had to figure out how to use it before Dalton figured out I had it, before winter came, before the 90 days ran out, before everything fell apart. But I'd survived 16 years in the foster system. I'd survived 2 years on my own. I'd survived every disappointment and every loss, and every night I'd gone to bed hungry and cold and alone. I could survive this too. I had to. Because there was nowhere else to go, no one else to be, nothing else to fight for. This was it, this broken house, this cursed land, this impossible dream. This was home, and I was staying. The morning after I found the bunker, I walked into town with $1,600 in cash stuffed into my jacket pocket, and a plan that was either brave or stupid, probably stupid, but it was the only plan I had. The county clerk's office opened at 8. Pearl was already there when I arrived, sorting mail with the same methodical care I'd seen the day before. She looked up when the door opened, saw me, and something in her expression softened. "You came back. I need to make a payment on the taxes." She set down the mail and pulled out a ledger. "How much?" $1,100. Pearl's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's the first installment. You found some money." "I found a lot of things." She didn't ask what, just took the cash, counted it carefully, stamped a receipt, and slid it across the counter. "You've got until June 15th for the rest. $2,100. She paused. "That's a lot of money for someone with holes in her boots." "I'll figure it out." Pearl studied me for a long moment. Then she reached under the counter and pulled out a business card. "This is my feed store. I've got some inventory that's not fit to sell. Damaged bags, dented cans, things that got wet or expired or just didn't move. You can have it if you can use it." "I can't pay you." "I didn't ask you to. I'm asking if you can use it." I looked at the card, at Pearl's weathered face and sharp eyes and the way she was trying to help without making it feel like charity. "Yes, ma'am. I can use it." "Good, come by this afternoon. I'll have it ready." I walked out of that office with $500 left in my pocket and the first real hope I'd felt in days. It wasn't much, but it was something, and something was more than I'd had 24 hours ago. Pearl's Feed and Supply sat at the north end of Main Street in a building that looked like it had been there since the town was founded. Wooden floors worn smooth by 100 years of boots. Tin ceiling painted white but peeling in the corners. Shelves stocked with feed bags and fence posts and tools, and everything a rancher might need to survive another season. The smell hit me when I walked in. Grain and leather and motor oil and dust. The smell of work and sweat, and the stubborn determination to keep going even when it doesn't make sense anymore. Pearl was behind the counter talking to a man who was loading bags of feed onto a dolly. She saw me and nodded toward the back room. In there, take what you can carry. The back room was full of exactly what she described. 50-pound bags of chicken feed with tears in the plastic, cans of motor oil with dented sides, coils of wire that had gotten wet and rusted in spots, tarps with small holes, bags of nails that had spilled and been swept back together. Nothing pretty, nothing new, but all of it usable if you didn't mind imperfect. I started loading things into a cart. Feed for chickens I didn't have yet, wire for fences I needed to fix, nails for repairs I didn't know how to make, tarps to cover the holes in the roof. I was so focused on the supplies that I didn't hear someone come up behind me until a voice spoke. Quiet, male, close enough to startle me. You need help with that. I turned. The man from earlier stood there, not old but not young either, maybe 25. Tall, dark hair pulled back, dark eyes that didn't give much away. Crow Nation. I could tell from the beadwork pattern on his jacket and the way Pearl had introduced him. He was looking at the heavy bags of feed I'd been trying to lift onto the cart. I can manage, I said. He didn't argue, just grabbed one end of a feed bag and waited for me to grab the other. We loaded it together, then another, and another. We worked in silence for 10 minutes. When the cart was full, he wheeled it out to the front. Pearl saw us and smiled slightly. Cassidy, this is Jackson Crow. People call him Jax. He works for me part-time. Jax, this is Cassidy Tate. She bought the old Tate place. Jax looked at me, nodded once, didn't say anything. Can you help her load this into her truck? Pearl asked. Don't have a truck, I said. I was going to carry what I could and come back for the rest. Pearl and Jax exchanged a look. Then Jax spoke again, same quiet voice. I'll drive you. You don't have to do that. I know. And that was that. He loaded everything into the bed of an old Chevy pickup while I stood there feeling useless and grateful and confused about why a stranger would help me. We drove to the ranch in silence, just the sound of the engine and the tires on gravel and the wind through the open windows. When we got there, Jax helped me unload everything without being asked, stacked the feed bags in the garage, coiled the wire neatly, put the tarps where they'd stay dry. He moved with the kind of efficiency that comes from years of physical work. No wasted motion, no hesitation, just steady competence. When everything was unloaded, he stood looking at the house, at the collapsed roof and broken windows and sagging porch. His expression didn't change, but I could feel him evaluating, calculating, judging whether this was salvageable or a lost cause. It's bad, I said. I've seen worse. Really? He almost smiled. No, but you don't need to hear that. He got back in his truck, started the engine. Then he looked at me through the open window. Pearl said your grandmother used to help people. My mother was one of them. What did she do? Delivered me when the roads were too iced over to get to the hospital. My mother would have died without her. I didn't know what to say to that. Jax put the truck in gear. Deaths don't end just because people die. And then he drove away, leaving me standing in the yard with a pile of supplies and the first flicker of something I was afraid to name. Hope maybe, or the possibility of help, or the idea that I might not have to do this completely alone. That night I slept in the truck again. But this time I had tarps to block the wind and feed bags to use as insulation, and the knowledge that somewhere in this dying town there were people who remembered my grandmother, who maybe remembered what it meant to help your neighbor even when you didn't have to. November came hard. The temperature dropped to 5 degrees at night, then 0, then 5 below. I learned to judge the cold by how fast my breath froze, how quickly my fingers went numb, how long I could work outside before I had to go back in and warm up or risk frostbite. I learned other things too. How to chop wood without hitting my own leg. How to start a fire with wet kindling and pure stubbornness. How to bank the coals overnight so they'd still be burning in the morning. How to stretch one can of beans into 2 meals. How to ignore hunger when there was no food left and no money to buy more. Jax came back 3 days after that first visit. Didn't explain why. Didn't ask permission. Just showed up at dawn with tools and lumber and started working on the roof. I climbed up to help him. We worked in silence for hours. The only sounds were hammers and saws and boots on old shingles and the wind that never stopped blowing across the prairie. When the sun started to set, Jax climbed down and looked at what we'd accomplished. One small section of roof patched, tarps secured over the bigger holes. Not much, but enough to keep the next rain out of the bedroom at least. "You coming back tomorrow?" I asked. He shrugged, probably. "Why are you helping me?" He looked at me for a long moment. His eyes were dark brown, almost black, and they had a steadiness that made me want to look away, but I didn't. "Told you already. Debts don't end. This isn't your debt. Your mother's debt to my grandmother doesn't transfer to you. Doesn't work that way in my family." And then he left, but he came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that, always at dawn, always with tools, always working until dark. We spoke maybe 20 words a day total, but we communicated just fine. He showed me how to read wood grain before cutting it, how to square corners with string and stakes, how to tell if a beam was rotted through or just surface damaged, how to make repairs that would last instead of just covering problems. I showed him where the water ran sweetest in the creek, where the wild horses grazed at sunset, where my grandmother had planted apple trees that hadn't bloomed in 5 years but might still be alive underneath. Small things, useless things, but he listened like they mattered. Ruth Sanders hired me at the Silver Creek Diner 3 nights a week. Dishwashing. Minimum wage in cash. No questions asked. The diner was small and warm and smelled like coffee and frying meat, and the particular comfort of food cooked by someone who cared whether you ate or not. Ruth was 52 with gray-streaked hair and tired eyes and hands that never stopped moving. She'd lost her husband 5 years ago to cancer, and her daughter had moved to Denver, and she ran the diner because it was the only thing she knew how to do. "Your grandmother used to come here every Sunday after church," Ruth told me on my first night. "Same booth, same order, coffee and apple pie and whatever gossip she'd collected during the week. She talked about Laura all the time, showed me pictures, told me stories, was so sure Laura would come home someday. She never did." Ruth looked at me with something like sympathy. "No, but you did, and me would have loved that." I worked those nights scrubbing pots until my hands cracked, mopping floors until my back ached, eating whatever Ruth couldn't sell, which was sometimes the only food I had. It wasn't glamorous, but it was survival, and survival was all I had the energy for. December came and the real cold arrived. 20 below at night, 15 below during the day. The kind of cold that makes your lungs hurt when you breathe. That turns your eyelashes to ice. That kills things that aren't strong enough to survive it. I learned to layer every piece of clothing I owned, to move constantly to keep blood flowing, to recognize the early signs of frostbite, to know when to push through and when to retreat before the cold one. Jax taught me without teaching. He didn't explain things. He just did them and expected me to watch and learn. How to predict weather changes by watching the clouds stack on the horizon. How to move through snow without exhausting yourself. How to build a fire that would burn 8 hours on 6 logs. How to find water even when the creek froze solid. And slowly, I stopped feeling like a girl playing at ranch work and started feeling like someone who might actually survive this. We worked close together on cold days, shared body heat without talking about it, passed tools hand to hand, and sometimes our fingers touched and neither of us pulled away as fast as we could have. He brought extra sandwiches and left them without comment. I made coffee and poured him a cup without asking if he wanted it. Small gestures, nothing spoken, but a language developing between us anyway. One afternoon we were working on the barn, trying to stabilize a wall before winter snow brought the whole thing down. Jax was showing me how to brace a beam when my foot slipped on ice and I started to fall. He caught me, fast, one arm around my waist, the other grabbing the beam to keep us both from going down. For maybe 3 seconds we stood like that, close enough that I could feel his breath, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Close enough that if either of us moved an inch, we'd be even closer. Then he steadied me and stepped back and we went back to work like nothing had happened. But something had. We both knew it. And after that day he worked a little closer. And I found more reasons to need his help. Early December brought Roy Dalton back. I was splitting firewood when his truck pulled up. Black Ford F-350, pristine and expensive and completely wrong for the muddy yard. He got out wearing clean boots and a sheepskin coat and a Stetson hat that probably cost more than I'd make in 6 months. He smiled, but his eyes stayed cold. Miss Tate, settling in. Doing my best. I can see that. He looked around at the patched roof and the stacked firewood and the smoke rising from the chimney. You've been busy. Not much choice. Actually, there is. He pulled out a checkbook. I'd like to make you another offer. $7,000, cash, today. That's more than enough to pay off the taxes and have money left over. You could be in Billings by tonight. Start fresh somewhere warm. The property's not for sale. His smile faded slightly. You're 18 years old. You've got no money and winter's just getting started. What happens when the real cold comes? When the snow gets too deep to drive out? When you can't get to town for supplies? I'll manage. Your grandmother said the same thing. You know what happened to her. She died alone out here. Nobody even knew for 3 days. Is that what you want? I stepped closer to him, held the axe steady in my hands, not threatening, just there. My grandmother lived here for 60 years, raised a family, survived droughts and blizzards and everything this land could throw at her. I think I can make it one winter. Dalton's eyes went flat. She was stubborn, refused every offer I made, sat out here watching everything fall apart rather than admit she was beaten. Maybe she wasn't beaten. Maybe she just knew what mattered. And what's that? Keeping what's yours, not giving in to people like you. His jaw tightened. People like me keep this valley running. I employ half the town. I pay taxes that fund the roads and schools. I'm not the enemy here. Then why do you want my land so badly? Water rights. There's a drought coming. Next 5 years, maybe 10, water's going to be worth more than land. I'm planning ahead. Planning to control it, you mean? Planning to manage it responsibly. I don't believe you. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he put the checkbook away. You've got until June to pay those taxes. When you miss the deadline, and you will, I'll be waiting. Just like I waited for your grandmother. There was something in the way he said it, something that made my skin crawl. What does that mean? It means stubborn people usually learn their lessons too late. He got back in his truck and drove away, but he circled the property twice before heading back toward his ranch, making sure I saw him, making sure I knew he was watching. That night I told Jax what Dalton had said. We were sitting in the kitchen drinking coffee, the wood stove crackling in the corner. Jax listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. He's dangerous, Jax finally said. I know. My grandfather knew him, said Dalton's killed before. I know that too. My grandfather wrote about it in his journal. Then why stay? I looked around the kitchen. At the walls I'd patched. At the windows I'd covered with plastic to keep the cold out. At the wood stove we'd hauled from an abandoned barn 20 miles away. Because this is mine. Because someone has to stand up to men like him. Because if I run now, he wins. And I'm tired of men like Roy Dalton winning. Jax looked at me with something I couldn't quite read in his eyes. Respect maybe, or recognition, like he understood exactly what I meant. My family's been fighting men like him for 200 years. We're still here. So are they, but we're still fighting. Will you teach me how? He almost smiled. Already am. Christmas Eve arrived with a blizzard warning. Weather service said 30 below wind chill, 40-mile-per-hour winds, 2 feet of snow expected. Roads would be closed for at least 48 hours, maybe longer. Pearl called me at the diner that afternoon. You need to get home before dark. This storm's going to be bad. I'm working till 9. Ruth won't care, go now. I looked out the window at the sky. It was the color of old bruises, purple and gray and black all swirled together, the kind of sky that promised violence. Okay, I'm leaving. Jax is with his family on the reservation. Pearl's voice was careful. You'll be alone out there. I've been alone before. Not in a storm like this. I'll be fine. The line was quiet for a moment. Then Pearl said something that surprised me. Your grandmother would be proud of you, stubborn as hell, but proud. I drove home through wind that rocked the truck. Snow started falling before I made it halfway. Big flakes at first, then smaller, harder, driven horizontal by the wind. By the time I reached the ranch, visibility was down to maybe 20 feet. I got the truck into the garage and ran for the house. The wind hit me like a fist, cold so intense it felt like burning. I made it inside and slammed the door and stood there shaking. The storm hit full force around 10 that night, wind screaming like something alive and angry, snow so thick I couldn't see the barn 30 yards away. The temperature dropped to 25 below, then 30. The house groaned and creaked and shook. I fed the fire constantly, boiled water so the pipes wouldn't freeze, checked every window seal, and waited for morning. Around 11 I saw lights through the window, headlights, weaving erratically on the road, coming closer, then swerving, then disappearing. I grabbed my coat and flashlight and went out into the storm. The cold was beyond anything I'd experienced. It felt like being stabbed with 1,000 knives. Each breath burned going down. My eyes watered and the tears froze on my cheeks. I could barely see through the snow, but I followed where the lights had been. 300 yards from the house I found the car, a Honda Accord, completely wrong for Wyoming winter. It had slid off the road and into a ditch. The rear wheels were spinning uselessly. The engine was still running but starting to smoke. I banged on the window. A woman's face appeared, dark hair, dark eyes, terrified. She opened the door and snow blew in and I saw there were kids in the back seat. A boy maybe 10 and a girl younger. The girl wasn't moving. My daughter, the woman gasped. Please, she won't wake up. I looked at the girl. Her lips were blue. Her skin was pale, her breathing shallow, hypothermia, maybe minutes from death. Get out, all of you, now. The woman pulled the boy out. I reached for the girl. She was so light, like holding a bird. Her skin was cold, too cold. I wrapped her in my coat and started running back toward the house. The woman stumbled behind me, dragging the boy. The wind tried to knock us down. The snow blinded us. But I kept moving, kept counting steps, kept pushing forward. We made it inside and I kicked the door shut behind us, laid the girl on the floor near the fire, checked her pulse, weak but there, breathing, barely. The woman collapsed beside her daughter, sobbing in Spanish. I remembered Me's journal, the section about midwifery, about delivering babies in blizzards, about hypothermia and frostbite and how to bring people back from the edge. Warm them slowly, she'd written. Too fast and the cold blood rushes to the heart and stops it. Slow, gentle, patient. I pulled off the girl's wet clothes, wrapped her in every blanket I had, positioned her 6 feet from the fire, close enough for warmth but not so close she'd heat too fast. Then I looked at the mother. What's your name? Carmen Ruiz. This is Mateo, and that's Lily. Is she going to die? Not if I can help it. I need you to hold her. Skin to skin, share your body heat. Carmen stripped off her wet coat and shirt and took Lily in her arms, held her against her chest, rocked her gently, prayed in Spanish. I gave Mateo dry clothes and hot chocolate made with powdered mix and creek water. He sat in the corner, silent, watching his mother and sister with eyes that looked too old for 10 years. I boiled water for broth, warmed towels by the fire, checked Lily's pulse every 15 minutes, and waited. That was the hardest part, waiting, knowing there was nothing else to do, just wait and hope and pray to whatever God might be listening that this little girl would survive. The hours crawled by. Midnight, 1 in the morning, 2, 3. The storm raged outside, the fire crackled. Carmen rocked Lily and prayed. Mateo fell asleep in the corner, exhausted by fear. I kept the fire burning and the water boiling and my own terror pushed down deep where it couldn't paralyze me. At 4:17 in the morning, Lily whimpered. Carmen gasped, pulled her daughter tighter. Mi hija, mi amor. Lily's eyes flickered open. Mama. Carmen started crying, real crying, the kind that comes from relief so profound it breaks you. Yes, yes baby, Mama's here. I slumped against the wall and felt something loosen in my chest. She was going to live. We'd gotten her warm enough fast enough. She was going to be okay. Carmen looked at me over Lily's head. You saved her. You saved my baby. I didn't know what to say to that. So I just got up and made more broth and tried not to think about what would have happened if I hadn't seen those headlights. If I hadn't gone out in the storm. If I'd been 5 minutes later. The blizzard raged for 3 more days. We were snowed in completely. The road disappeared under 4 feet of snow. The truck was buried. There was no way in or out, just the 5 of us in that small house. Carmen and Mateo and Lily and me. Strangers thrown together by chance and weather and circumstance. Carmen's story came out in pieces over those days. She'd been fleeing a bad situation in Denver, heading to Billings for a job, hotel housekeeping, minimum wage but better than nothing. Her GPS had said there was a shortcut through the back roads. She'd taken it. The storm had hit. She'd lost control on ice and crashed. Thought they were going to die out there in the cold and dark. My husband died 3 years ago, she told me on the second day. Cancer. He was a good man, worked for the county, coroner's assistant, kept meticulous records. She paused. He kept a lot of things actually. Files, documents, things he thought were important. What kind of things? Cases he thought were wrong, deaths he thought were suspicious. He was afraid to speak up, afraid of losing his job, but he kept copies of everything just in case. Something in my chest went tight. Your husband worked in Clearwater County. For 12 years, why? My grandfather died here in 1999. Heart attack supposedly, but I think he was murdered. Carmen went very still. What was his name? William Tate. She stood up, went to the pile of belongings they'd salvaged from the car, pulled out a cardboard box, came back and set it on the table. After Roberto died, I kept his work files. I don't know why, I never looked through them, just couldn't throw them away. She opened the box. Inside were folders, dozens of them, old county coroner reports, autopsy notes, Death certificates, all organized by year. Carmen flipped through them, stopped, pulled one out. Her hands were shaking when she handed it to me. The label said William Tate, February 5, 1999. I opened it with hands that wouldn't work right. Inside was a death certificate. Cause of death, cardiac arrest. Ruled natural causes. No autopsy performed per family request. Signed by the county medical examiner. But clipped to the certificate was a handwritten note. Roberto's handwriting based on the signature. The note said, "Sheriff ordered me not to file full report. Preliminary blood work showed elevated digitalis levels, 10 times normal therapeutic dose. Consistent with poisoning, not heart medication. I recommended full autopsy. Sheriff Thomas Dalton threatened my job if I pursued it. I complied. I should have fought harder. William Tate was murdered." I read it 3 times. The words didn't change. My grandfather had been poisoned. The medical examiner had known. The sheriff had covered it up. And Roy Dalton's brother had been the sheriff. "Do you have more?" I asked. My voice sounded strange, distant. Carmen nodded. 20 years of files. Roberto said the Dalton family was untouchable, that they'd been getting away with things for decades. He was too afraid to do anything, but he kept the evidence, just in case. I looked at the box, at 2 decades worth of suspicious deaths and covered-up crimes and a pattern of corruption that went back longer than I'd been alive. This is what I need. This is proof. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, but something. Something that makes sure my grandfather didn't die for nothing. Carmen reached across the table and took my hand. "You saved my daughter's life. If there's any way I can help you, any way at all, just ask. Stay, help me go through these files. Help me understand what happened. Help me figure out how to fight." She squeezed my hand. "We're not leaving. You saved Lily. We owe you. And maybe Roberto's evidence can finally help someone." On the 4th day, the storm cleared. The sky was blue and empty and so bright it hurt to look at. The sun turned the snow to diamonds. Everything was white and clean and beautiful, like the world had been remade overnight. But under that beauty, under that clean white snow, were tracks, truck tracks circling the property. Someone had been here during the storm. Someone had been watching, and I knew without having to ask who it was. Roy Dalton, still circling, still waiting, still sure that eventually I'd fail and he'd win. But now I had something he didn't know about. I had Roberto's files. I had proof of murder. I had evidence that his family had been covering up crimes for decades, and I had people willing to help. Carmen with her records, Jax with his quiet strength, Pearl with her stubborn loyalty. I wasn't alone anymore. And that changed everything. That night I read through my grandfather's journal again. Read the entries about water and power and men who killed to get what they wanted. And I read the last entry one more time. The one where he wrote, "If you're reading this and I'm dead, it wasn't natural causes." He'd been right, and now I had proof. And I was going to make sure everyone knew the truth about my grandfather, about Roy Dalton, about everything they'd been hiding for 20 years. But first I had to survive the winter, had to make it to spring, had to pay the taxes and keep the land and build something strong enough that, when I finally went to war, I'd have ground to stand on. Carmen and her kids stayed in the house. We cleared out one of the bedrooms that wasn't too damaged, made it livable. Carmen cooked and cleaned and helped with repairs. Mateo chopped wood and hauled water and did the hard physical work without complaining. Lily drew pictures and asked questions and reminded us all why we were fighting. For kids like her. For families trying to survive. For the idea that good people deserved a place to be safe. Jax came back 2 days after the storm, saw the extra truck in the yard, raised an eyebrow in question. "Blizzard," I said. "They crashed, stayed." He nodded like this made perfect sense. Okay. And that was that. He went back to work on the barn like nothing had changed, but everything had changed. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. I had allies. I had help. I had something that looked almost like family. And I had the truth about my grandfather's death burning in my chest like fire, waiting, growing, getting ready to explode. Roy Dalton had killed my grandfather. He'd covered it up for 20 years. He'd driven my mother away. He'd waited for my grandmother to die. And now he was waiting for me to fail. But I wasn't going to fail. I was going to survive. And then I was going to destroy him. The war was coming. I could feel it, like thunder on the horizon, like the first cold wind before a storm, like the moment before lightning strikes and everything changes. And I was ready, or as ready as an 18-year-old girl with nothing but stubbornness and rage and a dead grandfather's journal could be. But sometimes that's enough. Sometimes stubborn is all you need. Sometimes rage is the fuel that keeps you going when everything else runs out. I fed the fire and watched the snow fall and waited for spring. Waited for the day when I'd have enough evidence and enough allies and enough courage to walk into town and tell everyone what Roy Dalton had done. That day was coming soon. But for now I had a winter to survive, a family to protect, a house to rebuild, and a truth to guard until the moment was right. I could wait. I'd been waiting my whole life for something that mattered, for somewhere I belonged, for a reason to fight. And now I had all three. January arrived like a fist. The temperature dropped to 20 below and stayed there for days, then 30 below. Then one morning I woke up and the thermometer outside the kitchen window read 38 below zero. The kind of cold that makes metal brittle and wood crack and breath freeze before it leaves your mouth. The kind of cold that kills things. But inside the house something had changed. Carmen cooked breakfast every morning. Eggs and toast and coffee that actually tasted good because she knew how to make it. Mateo helped with the heavy work, hauling firewood, breaking ice on the water barrels, feeding the chickens Pearl had given us. He was 11 years old, but he worked like a man. Quiet, steady, never complaining even when his hands went numb from the cold. Lily drew pictures of the ranch and taped them to the walls. Bright crayon drawings of horses and chickens, and a house that looked whole instead of broken, like she could see what the place might become instead of what it was. The house felt alive in a way it hadn't before. Voices, laughter, the sound of people moving through rooms, the smell of cooking, the warmth of bodies. For the first time since I'd arrived, the ranch felt like something other than a ruin. It felt almost like home. Jax came back on a Tuesday morning 2 weeks after the blizzard. I heard his truck before I saw it, that particular rattle of an engine that had seen too many winters. He got out slowly. His shoulder was still healing and I could see he favored it. But he had tools in the truck bed and that look on his face that meant he was here to work. "Roads are clear," he said. "I see that. Thought I'd finish the barn repairs before the next snow." "Your shoulder." "Good enough. Pearl said you were supposed to rest." "Pearl says a lot of things." We looked at each other for a moment, then I nodded toward the barn. "All right, let's work." We spent the morning reinforcing support beams. The barn had been leaning for so long I wasn't sure it could be saved, but Jack seemed to think it was possible. He moved around the structure like he could read its bones, knew which beams were critical and which were decorative, knew where to brace and where to let go. I followed his lead, handed him tools, held boards steady while he nailed them. And slowly the barn started to feel less like something dying and more like something that might survive. Around noon, Carmen brought us lunch, sandwiches and coffee in a thermos. We sat on the tailgate of Jax's truck and ate in the cold sunshine. Mateo was in the distance chopping wood with the careful precision Jax had taught him. Lily was making a snowman that looked more like a snow blob, but she was happy. "You're good with them," Jax said, nodding toward Carmen and the kids. "They're easy to be good to. Most people wouldn't have gone out in that storm." I shrugged. Couldn't just leave them. Could have, probably should have, was dangerous. "I know. But you did it anyway." I looked at him, at his dark eyes and serious face and the way he was trying to say something without actually saying it. "Yeah, I did." He nodded slowly, like I'd confirmed something he'd been thinking. "That's good. That's what this place needs." "What do you mean?" "Someone who'll fight for it, not because they have to, because they want to." Before I could answer, we heard it, a crack, sharp and loud like a gunshot, then a groan, deep and long like the earth itself was sighing. We both looked at the barn. For a second nothing happened. Then everything happened at once. The support cable we just reinforced snapped, not frayed, not rusted through, cut. I saw the clean edge of metal even as it whipped past. The beam it had been holding shifted. The whole structure shuddered, and then it started to come down. I was on the ladder checking a joint, 12 feet up. No time to climb down. The ladder tipped. I felt myself falling, felt the stomach drop of weightlessness, felt time slow down the way it does when you know you're about to hit hard and there's nothing you can do about it. Then Jax was there, moving faster than I'd ever seen him move. He lunged, caught me, his good arm wrapping around my waist. We both went down, but he twisted so he hit first, took the impact, shielded me with his body. We crashed into frozen ground and I heard him grunt, heard the air leave his lungs. Then the timber fell, a support beam the size of a telephone pole. It swung down right where we'd been standing, hit the ground, bounced, and the whole front section of the barn collapsed. Dust and debris filled the air, wood and metal and 60 years of accumulated weight coming down all at once. I couldn't see, couldn't breathe, could only feel Jax under me, still, too still. "Jax," my voice came out hoarse. "Jax." He groaned, tried to move. I rolled off him and saw his face go white. His shoulder, the one that had been healing, he'd landed on it, dislocated it again or worse. "Don't move." "Need to." His voice was tight with pain. "Need to get clear, in case more comes down." Carmen was running toward us, screaming something in Spanish. Mateo right behind her. They helped me pull Jax away from the wreckage, got him to the truck. His face was gray now, sweat on his forehead despite the cold. He'd broken ribs. I could see it in the way he breathed. Shallow, careful, like every breath hurt. Carmen already had her phone out, calling 911, telling them we needed an ambulance, giving directions. Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands shaking. I stayed with Jax, held his good hand. He looked at me with eyes that were trying to focus but couldn't quite. "You okay?" "Me? You just took a barn beam for me." "That's not an answer." "I'm fine, you saved me." "Good." He tried to smile, but it came out more like a grimace. "Debt's paid then." "Shut up, don't talk like that." The ambulance took 45 minutes, longest 45 minutes of my life. Carmen brought blankets. We wrapped Jax in them, kept him warm, kept him talking, kept him conscious. When the paramedics finally arrived, they stabilized his shoulder and loaded him onto a stretcher. One of them looked at me. "You family?" Yes, the lie came out automatically. He's my family. "You coming with?" I looked at Carmen, she nodded. "Go, we'll be fine." The clinic in town was small. One doctor, 2 nurses, equipment that looked like it was from the 80s, but they knew what they were doing. Dr. Morrison was 70 if he was a day, but his hands were steady and his voice was calm. He reset Jax's shoulder while Jax bit down on a leather strap to keep from screaming. Then X-rays showed 2 cracked ribs. Nothing they could do for those except tape them and tell him to rest. 4 to 6 weeks, Dr. Morrison said. No heavy work, no lifting, no stress on that shoulder or those ribs. You're lucky you didn't puncture a lung. Jax nodded, didn't argue, he was exhausted. Pain did that. Wore you down until you had nothing left to fight with. I sat with him while they gave him something for the pain, watched his eyes get heavy, watched his breathing even out, and I thought about that support cable, about the clean cut, about the way it had snapped right after we'd reinforced it. That wasn't an accident, that was sabotage. Someone had cut that cable. Someone had waited until we were working on the barn. Someone had tried to kill us. Pearl arrived at the clinic an hour later. She came through the door like a storm. Saw Jax lying there with his shoulder bandaged and his ribs taped, and her face went hard as stone. What happened? Barn collapsed. How? Old structure, winter rot, cable snapped. Pearl walked over to Jax, looked down at him, then looked at me. Her eyes were cold. I told you that place would kill someone. It was an accident. There are no accidents with the Daltons. What are you talking about? I'm talking about Roy Dalton buying up this valley piece by piece for 40 years. I'm talking about people who stood in his way ending up dead or gone. I'm talking about you being young and stubborn and stupid enough to think you can fight him. I'm not trying to fight anyone. I'm just trying to survive. That's what they all said. The Crows in '85, the Johnsons in '92, your grandfather in '99. They all thought they could just keep their heads down and survive. Pearl's voice cracked. They were wrong. She turned back to Jax. You're done helping her, you hear me? Done. Jax opened his eyes, tried to speak. Pearl held up her hand. I mean it, Jackson. I raised you after your mother died. I've kept you safe for 20 years. I'm not losing you to this. Pearl. No, her voice was final. You're staying with your aunt on the reservation until you heal, and when you're healed, you're staying there. You're not going back to that ranch. Jax looked at me. There was something in his eyes, apology maybe, or regret, but he didn't argue with Pearl, didn't fight her, just closed his eyes again and turned his face away. Pearl looked at me one more time. Stay away from him. Stay away from all of us, before someone else gets hurt. She walked out, left me standing there in a clinic room with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and my heart breaking in ways I didn't know hearts could break. I rode back to the ranch with Carmen. Neither of us spoke. What was there to say? Jax was gone. Pearl had made that clear, and I was alone again, except for Carmen and her kids, and they'd only stayed because I'd saved Lily. Once Carmen got enough money together, once she found that job in Billings, they'd leave too, and I'd be right back where I started, alone in a broken house fighting a fight I couldn't win. That night I went to the barn, looked at the wreckage, found the cable end. It was cut clean. Someone had used bolt cutters recently. The metal was still bright where the blades had bitten through. This wasn't wear and tear. This wasn't age. This was deliberate. Someone had tried to kill me, or at least tried to scare me bad enough that I'd give up and leave. I showed Carmen. She examined the cable in the flashlight beam. Her face went pale. You need to call the police. The sheriff is Dalton's nephew. Then call the state police. And say what? Someone cut a cable on my property. There's no witnesses, no proof it was Dalton, just my word against his. And I'm an 18-year-old girl with no money and no connections. Who do you think they'll believe? Carmen was quiet for a long time. Then what do? We document everything, take pictures, save the evidence, and we keep digging. There has to be something in Roberto's files, something that proves Dalton's been doing this for years. We spent the next 3 days going through every file in that box. 20 years of county coroner reports, death certificates, autopsy notes, and slowly a pattern emerged. 12 properties acquired by Roy Dalton between 1985 and 2010, all of them from elderly owners, all of them sold within 2 years of the owner's death, and every single death ruled natural causes, heart attacks mostly, a few car accidents, one house fire. But the timing was too convenient, too consistent, too perfect. I made a list, wrote down names and dates and causes of death, laid it all out on the kitchen table where I could see the pattern, where anyone could see it if they knew what they were looking for. Thomas Crow, 1989. Heart attack during court case disputing property boundaries with Dalton. No autopsy. Ellen Martinez, 1992. Car accident on icy road 2 weeks after refusing to sell to Dalton. No investigation. William Tate, 1999. Heart attack with elevated digitalis levels. Sheriff blocked full autopsy. Margaret Chen, 2005. House fire ruled accidental. Property sold to Dalton 6 months later. 4 more names, 4 more deaths, 4 more properties that ended up in Dalton's hands, and not one of them properly investigated, not one of them questioned, because the sheriff was Dalton's brother, because the county coroner was afraid, because the system protected the powerful and crushed anyone who tried to fight back. "We need a lawyer," Carmen said. "Can't afford one. There has to be someone who will help." I thought about it, thought about everyone I'd met in this town. Pearl was angry, Ruth was gone, Jax was forbidden from seeing me. Who was left? Who in this valley had the knowledge and the courage and the sheer stubborn will to fight Roy Dalton? Then I remembered something Pearl had said once, about a lawyer who'd retired to the reservation, a man who'd spent 40 years fighting land grabs, a man who hated Dalton with a passion. "I know someone," I said, "but I don't know if he'll help." "What's his name?" "Henry Blackwater." The drive to the Crow Reservation took an hour. The roads were better now. February thaw had melted some of the snow. The temperature had climbed to 15 above zero, which felt tropical after weeks of 30 below. Carmen came with me. Mateo and Lily stayed at the ranch with strict instructions not to open the door for anyone. Henry Blackwater lived in a small cabin by the river. Wood smoke rose from the chimney. A horse grazed in a corral out back. The place looked peaceful, like a man who'd earned his rest and was content to take it. I knocked on the door, waited, heard footsteps inside. The door opened. The man who stood there was old, maybe 75, Crow Nation. Silver hair pulled back in a braid, lines on his face like a map of hard years, but his eyes were sharp, intelligent, missing nothing. He looked at me, then at Carmen, then back at me. "You're William Tate's granddaughter." It wasn't a question. I nodded anyway. "Yes, sir." "Thought so. You look like him. Same eyes, same stubborn jaw." He stepped back. "Come in." The cabin was small but comfortable. Books everywhere. Legal documents stacked on a desk. Maps on the walls. Photos of younger men in uniform. Vietnam era based on the uniforms. I recognized my grandfather in one of them, standing next to a younger version of the man in front of me. "You knew my grandfather?" Henry nodded. "Served with him, 1st Cavalry Division, 68 to 70. He saved my life twice. Ia Drang Valley and Tet Offensive. I owed him everything." "I didn't know." "Lot of things you don't know." Henry gestured to chairs. "Sit. Tell me why you're here." I told him everything. About finding the ranch. About Roberto's files. About my grandfather's murder. About the pattern of deaths. About the barn collapse and the cut cable. About needing a lawyer but having no money. About being alone and scared and running out of time. Henry listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time, looking at something I couldn't see, remembering something I couldn't know. 35 years, he finally said. I've been waiting 35 years for someone to walk through that door and say they'd fight Roy Dalton. Will you help us? Henry stood, walked to his desk, pulled out a file, brought it back and set it on the table between us. Inside were documents, legal papers, photos, evidence. This is the Thomas Crow case. 1989, Thomas was my uncle. He owned 400 acres of river bottom land, best water in the valley. Dalton wanted it, made offers. Thomas refused, so Dalton used legal tricks, forged easements, fraudulent boundary surveys, bought the county assessor. We fought for 2 years, lost every motion. The judge was Dalton's friend. During the trial, Thomas had a heart attack, right there in the courtroom, died before the ambulance arrived. Case dismissed. 3 weeks later, Dalton's crews bulldozed the Crow family cemetery on that land. 150 graves, our ancestors destroyed, to build a cattle fence. I filed complaints. State Attorney General declined to investigate. Sheriff refused to press charges. That's when I learned the system protects men like Dalton, that the law doesn't work when the powerful write it. I've practiced law for 40 years. Won some, lost more, but I never stopped fighting. Your grandfather knew that. He came to me in '95, said Dalton would come for his land eventually, made me promise to fight when it happened. He looked at me. I promised. But William died before I could help, and I've carried that failure for 20 years. Now you're here, and I have one more chance to keep my promise. Will you take the case? Henry smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who'd been waiting decades for revenge and finally saw his chance. I'll do more than take it. I'll destroy him. What do you need? Everything you have. Files, photos, evidence, names and dates. I'll build a case that even a corrupt judge can't ignore. We don't have much money. I don't want money. I want justice. I want to watch Roy Dalton lose everything he's stolen. I want him to know what it feels like to be powerless. Can you win? Henry looked at me with those sharp eyes. I don't know. Dalton's got lawyers and money and connections, but we've got the truth. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes, the truth is enough. We spent the rest of the day organizing evidence. Henry made notes, asked questions, built a timeline, identified witnesses we could call, documents we could subpoena, weaknesses in Dalton's story. The legal strategy is simple, he said. We prove pattern, 12 properties, 12 suspicious deaths, 12 convenient outcomes. Even corrupt judges have limits. If we can show systematic fraud and probable homicide, the state will have to investigate. How long will it take? Months, maybe longer. Can you hold the ranch that long? I have to pay $2,100 in taxes by June 15th. After that, I'm clear for another year. Then we have 4 months. Henry looked at the evidence spread across his table. It's enough time, barely, but enough. Carmen and I drove back to the ranch as the sun was setting. The sky was pink and orange and gold. Beautiful. Like the land was promising something good even though I knew better than to believe it. When we got home, Mateo met us at the door. His face was pale. What's wrong? Someone was here. Who? Don't know, didn't see them, but they left something. He handed me an envelope. No address, no stamp, just my name written in block letters on the front. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message written in the same block letters. You have 1 week to accept my offer. $7,000, cash, leave town, or the next accident won't be an accident. It wasn't signed, didn't need to be. I knew who it was from. I crumpled the paper, threw it in the fire, watched it burn. Carmen looked at me. What are we going to do? We're going to keep fighting. But the next morning I woke up and Ruth's diner was closed. A sign on the door said building sold. New owner. Lease terminated. And I knew without asking who'd bought it, who'd driven Ruth out, who was tightening the noose around this town piece by piece. Pearl's feed store was next. 3 days later, a notice appeared on the door. Rent increased, effective immediately, double the previous amount. Pearl couldn't afford it. She was selling off inventory, preparing to close. I went to see her. She was in the back room packing up supplies. Her face was hard, closed off. "I'm sorry," I said. "Not your fault." "Feels like it is." She stopped packing, looked at me. "Dalton's been trying to run me out for 20 years. You didn't cause this. You just gave him another reason to try." "What will you do?" "Close the store. Move in with my sister in Billings. Retire. I'm 70 years old. I'm tired of fighting." "I understand." "Do you?" She stepped closer. "Because I don't think you do. I think you're 18 years old and brave and stupid and you think you can win this fight. But you can't. Dalton always wins. Always. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you can move on with your life." "What if I don't want to move on? What if this is my life?" "Then you'll end up like your grandmother. Alone. Waiting for someone who's never coming back." The words hit harder than I expected. I turned to leave. "Cassidy," Pearl's voice stopped me. "I wish things were different. I wish we lived in a world where the good guys won. But we don't. And I'm too old to pretend otherwise." I walked out without answering, got in the truck, drove home. And for the first time since I'd bought this ranch, I thought seriously about giving up, about taking Dalton's money, about walking away. That night I sat in Me's rocking chair looking at the photographs on the wall. My grandfather in his uniform, my grandmother young and hopeful, my mother pregnant and scared, all of them gone now, all of them defeated by the same man who was trying to defeat me. I thought about quitting, thought about how easy it would be. Sign the papers, take the cash, get on a bus and never look back, start over somewhere else, somewhere easier, somewhere I didn't have to fight just to survive. Carmen found me there at midnight, sat down on the floor beside the chair. "What are you thinking?" "That maybe Pearl's right. Maybe I should quit." "You don't mean that." "Don't I? Look around, Carmen. The feed store's closing. The diner's closed. Jax is gone. Pearl hates me. Ruth's gone. I'm about to lose the only job I had. And in 4 months I have to come up with $2,100 or lose everything anyway. Maybe fighting is pointless." Carmen was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke. "You saved my daughter's life. You went out into a blizzard that could have killed you. You carried Lily through snow and wind and cold that would have stopped anyone else. You did that because it was right, not because it was easy, not because you thought you'd win, because it was right." She stood up. "I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you this. If you quit now, men like Dalton win, not just here, everywhere, because that's what they count on. They count on good people getting tired, getting scared, giving up." She went upstairs, left me alone with the photographs and the fire and the weight of a decision I didn't want to make. I don't know how long I sat there, an hour maybe, maybe more, and then I saw it, on the shelf beside me's books. A small wooden box I'd never noticed before. I opened it. Inside was another letter. The paper was old, yellowed with age, the handwriting shaky. Me's handwriting, but addressed to someone else, to whom it may concern. I unfolded it carefully. The date at the top said January 2015, 3 days before Me died. The letter read, "My name is Margaret Tate. I am 82 years old. I am dying of cancer. And before I die, I need to tell the truth about what happened to my family. In 1999, my husband William was murdered, poisoned with digitalis by Roy Dalton. The sheriff covered it up because the sheriff was Roy's brother. The coroner was too afraid to fight. William died and Dalton got away with it. In 2000, my granddaughter Laura ran away. She was 17 and pregnant. She left because Roy Dalton threatened to kill me if she didn't. She took his money and disappeared. 3 weeks later, she died in a car accident that I don't believe was an accident. I have lived alone for 15 years carrying this truth, afraid to speak it, afraid Dalton would finish what he started, but I'm dying now, and I'm not afraid anymore. If anyone finds this letter, please know, Roy Dalton is a murderer. He killed my husband. He drove away my granddaughter. He has stolen land and destroyed families for 40 years, and he needs to be stopped. I'm leaving this ranch to my great-granddaughter Cassidy. I don't know if she'll ever find it. I don't know if she'll ever come home. But if she does, I want her to know the truth. I want her to have the weapon I never had, the truth. There is one more thing. In 2010, I filed a handwritten will with the Crow Tribal Council, outside the county jurisdiction that Dalton controls. That will states that the water rights to this land are held in perpetual trust for the Crow Nation and all small ranchers in this valley. The land can never be sold or consolidated. It must remain free. Dalton doesn't know about this will. He thinks when I die, the land will go to county probate. He thinks he can buy it at auction. He's wrong. If Cassidy comes home, she is trustee of that water. If she doesn't, Henry Blackwater is trustee. Either way, Dalton can never control it. To whoever reads this, protect the water, protect the land, protect my great-granddaughter if she comes home, and stop Roy Dalton, please. Stop him before he destroys anyone else. Signed, Margaret Tate, January 19, 2015. I read the letter 3 times, each time understanding more. Me had known everything. She'd known about the murder and the threats and the pattern of death, and she'd fought back the only way she could. She'd hidden the water rights where Dalton couldn't touch them. She'd created a legal barrier he couldn't break, and she'd left me the truth. I had a weapon now, a real weapon, not just evidence of old crimes but a legal document that destroyed Dalton's entire plan. He'd waited 20 years to get this land, and he'd already lost. He just didn't know it yet. I stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the dark prairie and the stars overhead and the land that my family had protected for 100 years. I'm not quitting, I said to the empty room. I'm not selling. I'm not leaving. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did, Roy Dalton. Everyone. The next morning I drove to the reservation, gave Henry the letter, watched his face change as he read it. This is it, he said. This is what we need. With this will, Dalton can't win. Even if you lose the land, the water stays protected. He gets nothing. When do we file? Not yet. We wait until he makes his next move. Let him think he's winning. Let him get confident. Then we hit him with everything at once. The murder evidence, the pattern, the will, we destroy him completely. I drove home feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Real hope. Not the fragile, desperate kind that breaks at the first setback. The solid kind built on truth and evidence and legal strategy. Carmen was waiting on the porch. She'd made coffee. We sat together in the February sunshine drinking it. You're staying, she said. It wasn't a question. I'm staying. Good, she smiled. Because I got that job in Billings. Start next month, but I talked to them. Explained I had someone depending on me. They said I could do it remote. Work from here, if you'll let us stay. Of course you can stay. Mateo wants to help with the ranch work. Says he's learning things here he never learned in the city. And Lily loves it here. She's happy. She paused. We're all happy. We sat there drinking coffee and watching the wind move across the prairie grass, and I thought about how strange life was. How you could lose everything and gain something else. How family wasn't always blood. How home wasn't always the place you were born. This was my family now. Carmen and Mateo and Lily. Henry fighting his 40-year war. Jack somewhere on the reservation thinking about me whether he admitted it or not. Pearl angry but not cruel. Ruth gone but not forgotten. And me, always me. Her letters and cards and photographs. Her stubborn love across 15 years of searching. Her final gift of truth and strategy and a legal weapon that would bring down the man who'd destroyed her family. I wasn't alone anymore. I had people, I had evidence, I had a plan. And I had something Roy Dalton would never understand. I had nothing left to lose, which meant I could risk everything. The war was coming. 4 months until the tax deadline. 4 months to gather evidence and build a case and prepare for battle. But I was ready, or as ready as I'd ever be. Because this wasn't just about land anymore. It was about justice, about truth, about making sure that the next girl who comes home to a broken ranch and impossible odds has a fighting chance. I finished my coffee, went inside, pulled out me's letter and read it one more time. Protect the water, protect the land, stop Roy Dalton. I will, Grandma, I whispered. I promise I will. February turned to March and the snow began to melt. Not all at once, just slowly. Patches of brown earth appearing through white. The creek running higher and faster. The sound of water everywhere, dripping from eaves, running in rivulets down the hillside, pooling in low places. The land waking up after a long, hard sleep. Henry came to the ranch twice a week. Brought files and documents and legal books with pages marked and highlighted. We worked at the kitchen table for hours, building a case, connecting dots, creating a timeline that showed 40 years of systematic fraud and probable murder. He worked with the precision of a surgeon, every piece of evidence labeled and cataloged, every witness identified and located, every legal argument researched and footnoted. Carmen helped. Her accounting background made her perfect for tracking financial records. She found patterns in property transfers, showed how Dalton had paid below market value for every acquisition, how he'd waited exactly the right amount of time after each death to avoid suspicion, how he'd structured deals to minimize tax liability, how he'd hidden assets through shell companies and family trusts. We have him on fraud, she said one afternoon. Multiple counts, tax evasion, racketeering maybe. Even without the murder charges, this is enough to destroy him financially. But we need the murder charges, Henry said. Financial crimes get you fines and maybe jail time. Murder gets you prison, life. And more importantly, murder makes it personal, makes it about the families he destroyed, makes it impossible for people to look away. Can you prove murder? Not yet. Henry spread out the files. We have William's autopsy note showing poisoning. We have Laura's suspicious death. We have 12 other deaths that follow the same pattern, but we don't have direct evidence. No witnesses who will testify. No physical proof linking Dalton to the crimes. What about the ranch hand? The one Roberto mentioned in his notes. Robert Whitehorse, worked for Dalton from 95 to 2010, quit suddenly, lives on the reservation now, drinks heavily, won't talk to outsiders. Can we get to him? I've tried, Henry shook his head. He's scared, traumatized. Whatever he saw, whatever he did, it broke something in him. He won't help us. Carmen looked at me. What about Jax? Isn't Whitehorse his uncle? I hadn't seen Jax in 6 weeks, not since Pearl had forbidden him from helping. Part of me wanted to call him, wanted to hear his voice, wanted to know if he thought about me the way I thought about him. But the other part, the part that was trying to be practical, knew it was better this way. He was healing. He was safe. And I couldn't ask him to risk himself again. I can't ask him, I said. Why not? Because he's already been hurt enough. Because Pearl was right. Because this isn't his fight. Henry looked at me over his reading glasses. Whose fight is it then? Mine, my grandfather, my family. Your grandfather was Jax's family too, in the ways that matter. He paused. Sometimes you have to let people choose their own battles, even when you're trying to protect them. That night I thought about calling Jax, picked up the phone 3 times, put it down 3 times. Finally, Carmen took the phone from me. Call him or I will. What am I supposed to say? The truth, that you need help, that his uncle might have information, that you miss him. She handed the phone back. Start with any of those. I dialed. It rang 4 times. I almost hung up. Then he answered. Hello. Jax, it's Cassidy. Silence, not the comfortable kind, the kind full of things unsaid. How's your shoulder? Better, still stiff, but healing. Good, that's good. More silence. I need to ask you something, I said. Okay. It's about your uncle, Robert Whitehorse. What about him? Henry says he worked for Dalton, says he might know things about my grandfather's death, but he won't talk to us. Jax was quiet for a long time. Then he won't talk to anyone. Been that way since he quit. Drinks all day, won't leave his trailer. My mom worries about him. I understand. I'm sorry I asked. I didn't say no. What? I didn't say I wouldn't help. I said he won't talk to anyone, but he might talk to me. And if he talks to me, I can tell you what he says. Pearl said you weren't supposed to help anymore. Pearl doesn't control me. He paused. I'll talk to my uncle, see what I can find out. No promises. Thank you. Cassidy. Yeah. How are you? The question caught me off guard. Simple words, but weighted with everything we weren't saying. I'm okay, surviving, missing you. Missing me or missing the help? Both. I tried to smile even though he couldn't see it. Mostly you. I heard him exhale, like he'd been holding his breath waiting for an answer. I'll come by tomorrow, with whatever my uncle tells me, if he tells me anything. He hung up before I could say anything else. I sat there holding the phone and feeling something warm spread through my chest. Hope maybe, or relief, or just the knowledge that I wasn't as alone as I'd thought. Jax arrived the next afternoon. He got out of his truck moving carefully, still favoring the shoulder, still healing, but there, he'd come. We sat on the porch. Carmen brought coffee, then disappeared inside to give us privacy. I talked to my uncle, Jax said. Took me 3 hours and half a bottle of whiskey to get him to open up, but he finally did. What did he say? He said he was there, February 1999. Dalton went to your grandfather's house to negotiate, brought a bottle of wine as a gift. Your grandfather drank it. They talked for an hour. Then they left. Jax looked out at the prairie. 3 days later, your grandfather was dead. My uncle didn't understand what happened until months later. Dalton hired a new foreman, told him some men are too stubborn to live. Medicine in the wine takes care of that. Digitalis. Yeah, heart medication. Undetectable in small doses, fatal in large ones. Did he see Dalton put it in the wine? No, but he was the one who bought the wine. Dalton's instructions. Specific bottle, specific vintage from a pharmacy in Billings. Not a liquor store, a pharmacy. That's not proof. It's a start. Jax pulled out a piece of paper. This is the name of the pharmacy, the date, the amount. My uncle kept receipts. He was Dalton's foreman. He handled all the purchases. He knew something was wrong, but he was too scared to speak up, so he kept the receipts as insurance. Can he testify? He's terrified, drinks to forget. But I think if pushed, if he knew it would matter, he might. He looked at me. He feels guilty, has for 20 years. Maybe this is his chance for redemption. I took the receipt, looked at it. A simple piece of paper, but potential proof that my grandfather had been murdered. Thank you for this, for talking to him, for risking Pearl's anger. Pearl's angry because she's scared. She lost her husband young, lost too many friends. She doesn't want to lose me too. I understand. Do you? Because you're not the only one fighting this fight, Cassidy. Some of us choose to fight alongside you. Why? He looked at me with those dark, steady eyes. Because some things are worth fighting for. Some people are worth protecting. He paused. You're worth it. Before I could respond, we heard it. Truck engines. Multiple coming fast. Jack stood, put himself between me and the road. 3 trucks roared up the drive, black, expensive, men in the beds, 6, maybe 8. They stopped in the yard. Doors opened. Roy Dalton got out of the lead truck. He looked at Jax, then at me, smiled. Miss Tate, Mr. Crow, having a nice visit. What do you want, Dalton? Just checking on my future property, making sure it's still standing. This isn't your property. Not yet, but soon. Very soon. He looked at Jax. Heard you got hurt, terrible accident, lucky you weren't killed. Wasn't an accident. No, Dalton's smile widened. What was it then? You know what it was. I know old barns fall down, especially in winter, especially when people don't know what they're doing. The men from the trucks had fanned out, standing casual but ready, looking at the house, the barn, the yard, like they were evaluating, planning, measuring for something. You should leave, I said. In a minute, I wanted to make one more offer, $10,000, final offer. Sign the deed over today and this all ends. You can walk away rich, start over somewhere safe. No. Dalton's face went cold, the smile disappeared, last chance. I said no. He looked at me for a long moment, then he nodded to his men. They got back in the trucks. Dalton walked to his door, turned back. Your grandmother was stubborn too. She died alone and broken. Your grandfather died choking on his own blood. Your mother died in a ditch in Idaho. He paused. Accidents happen to stubborn people, Miss Tate. Remember that. The trucks drove away, left dust and exhaust and the smell of threat hanging in the air. Jax's jaw was tight. We need to tell Henry, file for a restraining order. Won't help, the sheriff is Dalton's nephew. Then we need protection. From who? The police won't help. The courts won't help, it's just us. Then we make us enough. That night Carmen called everyone she could think of. People from her church in Denver, friends from the old neighborhood, anyone who'd ever owed her a favor or shown her kindness. And they came. Not many, but enough. 3 families, 2 single men, 1 older couple. They arrived with food and blankets and the willingness to stand guard. One of the men was a veteran, Afghanistan, 2 tour. His name was Thomas and he was 45 with gray in his beard and eyes that had seen things. He shook my hand. Carmen says you're fighting a good fight, says you need help. I don't want anyone getting hurt. Too late for that. We're all already hurt. Might as well make it mean something. They set up watch shifts, 2 people awake at all times, rotating every 4 hours. Thomas showed Mateo how to use the hunting rifle, how to sight down the barrel, how to breathe and squeeze, not pull, how to protect what's yours. Jack stayed too, moved into the bunkhouse we'd repaired. Pearl called twice a day trying to get him to come home. He didn't answer, just kept working, kept watching, kept standing guard. "This is crazy," Carmen said one night. "We're preparing for war. We've been at war since the day I bought this place. I just didn't know it yet. When do we stop fighting? When we win, or when we're dead?" She laughed, dark humor, but humor, I like those odds. Henry filed his first legal motion in early April. Motion to review death certificates for William Tate, Laura Tate, and 10 other individuals who died under suspicious circumstances. He submitted Roberto's files as evidence, submitted the pharmacy receipt, submitted affidavits from Carmen and me, built a case that even a corrupt judge would have trouble dismissing. The county fought it. Dalton's lawyers filed counter motions, claimed the evidence was hearsay, claimed the statute of limitations had expired, claimed we had no standing to request reviews. But Henry was relentless. He filed appeals, cited precedents, found loopholes, and slowly, he started winning small victories. The judge agreed to review William's death certificate, agreed to examine the autopsy records, agreed to consider reopening the investigation. Dalton was losing control. I could see it. He started making mistakes, started getting angry in public, started threatening people openly instead of in shadows. One afternoon he showed up at the ranch again, alone this time. No trucks, no men, just him, looking older, tired, mean. "You're making a mistake," he said. "I'm correcting one. You think you can win. You think some Indian lawyer and a bunch of old files can touch me. I think the truth matters." "The truth," he laughed, "the truth is I own this valley, have for 40 years, and nothing you do will change that." "We'll see." "No, we won't, because I'm done waiting." He pulled out papers, foreclosure notice. "Your taxes are due in 8 weeks. You have $2,100 to pay. You have $2,100. "I will." "No, you won't. And when you miss that deadline, this land becomes county property, and I'll buy it the next day, just like I always planned." "What about the water rights?" "What about them?" "They're not for sale." "Everything's for sale." He leaned closer. "And when I own this land, I own the water under it. And I'll charge every rancher in this valley for every drop they use. I'll control everything, like I should have 30 years ago. Over my dead body." He smiled, "If necessary." He left, and I stood there shaking, not from fear, from rage. Pure burning rage that this man had killed my grandfather and driven away my mother and destroyed so many families and was still here, still powerful, still winning. That night I couldn't sleep. I paced the house. Read me's letters again, read my grandfather's journal, read every piece of evidence we'd collected, and I thought about what Dalton had said, about the foreclosure, about buying the land, about controlling the water. And I realized something. He didn't know. He didn't know about me's will, didn't know the water rights were already in trust, didn't know that even if he got the land, he'd never control the water. We had a secret weapon, and it was time to use it. I called Henry at midnight, woke him up. "File the will, tomorrow, make it public. Let everyone know the water is protected." "Are you sure? Once we file, Dalton will know, he'll escalate." "He's already escalated. He threatened to kill me today. How much worse can it get?" Henry was quiet. Then, "All right, I'll file it in the morning, tribal court, outside county jurisdiction, and I'll notify every rancher in the valley, let them know the water is free. Forever." "Do it." The next morning Henry filed me's will with the Crow Tribal Council, and he didn't stop there. He copied it, sent it to every small rancher in the valley, posted it at the feed store and the diner and the church, made sure everyone knew that the water under Triple Creek Ranch was held in perpetual trust, that no one could buy it, no one could sell it, no one could control it. The response was immediate. Small ranchers started calling, thanking us, offering support. Men who'd been afraid of Dalton for decades suddenly found their courage, because the water meant everything. Without water, ranches died, cattle died, families died, and me had protected it, had made sure it would always be free. Dalton found out within hours. I know because he showed up at the ranch at 3 in the morning. Not alone this time, with 6 men, carrying bats and crowbars, breaking windows, kicking in the door. Thomas was on watch. He fired a warning shot. The sound split the night. Men scattered. Thomas fired again, into the dirt near their feet. They ran for their trucks. But Dalton didn't run. He stood in the yard screaming, "You can't do this. That water is mine. Mine. I waited 30 years for it, killed for it, destroyed families for it. And you think some piece of paper can take it away?" Thomas kept the rifle trained on him. "You need to leave. Now." Dalton looked at the house, at me standing in the doorway, at Jax beside me, at Carmen and Mateo and all the others who'd come to help, at the community we'd built. "This isn't over," he said. "You hear me? This isn't over." But it was. We all knew it. He'd lost. The will was legal, the water was protected, and everyone in the valley knew it. 2 days later, a man showed up at the ranch. Thin, sick-looking, 60 maybe but looking 80. He got out of an old truck and walked toward the house slow, like every step hurt. "My name is Marcus Webb. I need to talk to you." We sat on the porch. Carmen stood nearby with a phone recording everything. Marcus looked at his hands for a long time before speaking. "I'm dying, lung cancer, 6 months maybe. Not much time to make things right," he coughed. "Been working for Roy Dalton 20 years. Done things I'm not proud of." "What kind of things?" "Murder." The word hung in the air like smoke. In 1999, I helped poison William Tate, put digitalis in a bottle of wine, watched him drink it, watched him die 3 days later. In 2000, I was one of the men who ran Laura Tate off the road in Idaho. She was 17, pregnant, trying to start over. We killed her, made it look like an accident. In 2010, I helped burn down a barn owned by the Martinez family. 3 kids died in that fire. It was ruled electrical. It was arson. He pulled out a folder. Inside were photos, documents, receipts, bank records showing cash payments from Dalton, locations of buried evidence, names of other victims. I did these things because Dalton paid me, because I was greedy, because I was a coward, but I'm dying now, and I can't die with this weight. He looked at me with eyes full of tears. "I'm here to confess. I'll testify. I'll go to prison if I have to. I just need to make it right before I go." Carmen stopped recording, looked at me. I didn't know what to say. This was it. This was the proof we needed. Direct testimony from someone who'd helped commit the crimes. Photos and documents that corroborated everything. "Why now?" I finally asked. "Why not 10 years ago, 20 years ago?" "Because I was afraid, and selfish, and weak." He wiped his eyes. "Your grandfather was a good man. Your mother was just a girl. They didn't deserve what we did." "No, they didn't." Marcus handed me the folder. Everything's in there. Photos of accident scenes, copies of checks, names and dates. He stood. "I'll be at the tribal council office if you need me. I'm not running anymore." He walked back to his truck and drove away. I sat there holding a folder full of murder confessions and photographic evidence, and the complete destruction of Roy Dalton's life. That night Henry came to the ranch, read through Marcus's confession, looked at the photos, examined the evidence. His hands shook slightly as he turned pages. "This is everything. With this we have him. Murder, conspiracy, arson. We can prove pattern, we can prove intent. We can destroy him." "When do we file?" "Tomorrow. I'll submit everything to the state attorney general. Request a grand jury investigation. With this evidence, they'll have to act. Even with Dalton's connections, they can't ignore this." "What happens then?" "Then the state takes over. Criminal investigation, indictments, arrests. Dalton goes to trial for murder, multiple counts. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison." "And the ranch?" "The ranch is yours. The water is protected. The land stays in your family." Henry smiled. "You won. Against impossible odds, you actually won." But I didn't feel like I'd won. I felt tired, sad, angry that it had taken this long, that so many people had to die before anyone stopped him, that my grandfather and mother and all the others would never know justice had come. Carmen found me later sitting in me's rocking chair looking at photographs. She didn't say anything, just sat on the floor beside me and waited. "Is it always like this?" I asked, "winning but not feeling like you won?" "I think so. When you fight for something important, the cost is high, even when you win." I wish they were here to see it. My grandfather, my grandmother, my mother, all of them. "Maybe they are, in their own way." She pointed to the photographs. "They left you the tools to fight, the truth, the evidence, the will. They're part of this victory even if they can't celebrate it." "I hope so." The next morning, Henry filed criminal charges against Roy Dalton with the Wyoming State Attorney General. Murder in the first degree, multiple counts, conspiracy, fraud, racketeering, arson. The evidence was overwhelming. Marcus's confession, Roberto's files, the pharmacy receipts, the photos, the pattern of 40 years. The state police arrested Dalton at his ranch 3 days later. I watched from town as they let him out in handcuffs. He looked smaller somehow, older, defeated. He saw me watching. Our eyes met across the distance, and I saw it. The moment he understood he'd lost, really lost, everything. The arraignment was set for May, the trial for August, but the damage was done. Dalton's empire started crumbling immediately. Banks called in loans. Business partners fled. Properties were seized. Employees quit. Within 2 weeks, he'd lost more than half his holdings. And the valley started to heal. Small ranchers breathed easier. Water flowed free. People talked about the future instead of just surviving the present. The feed store stayed open. The diner reopened under new ownership. Life returned to a town that had been dying for 40 years. I made the final tax payment in early June, $2,100, most of it from Carmen's job, some from small donations from ranchers grateful for the water, a little from selling chickens and eggs. We scraped it together, put it in an envelope, drove to the county clerk. Pearl was there. She took the money, counted it, stamped the receipt, slid it across the counter, then she looked at me. "Your grandmother would be proud." "Thank you." "I was wrong about you, about the fight, about giving up." She paused. "Me never gave up, not in 60 years, and neither did you." She came around the counter, hugged me. It was quick, awkward, but real. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. "Jax is a good man. Don't let him go." "I won't." I walked out of that office with the receipt in my hand and the weight of 100 years lifted off my shoulders. The ranch was mine, clear title, no debt, the water protected, the land secure, and a future that looked like something other than fighting just to survive. Jax was waiting outside. He'd been banned from helping for months, but he'd come anyway, stood by me anyway, fought beside me anyway, and now here he was, waiting to see if I'd made it. I held up the receipt. "It's done. The land is paid for." He smiled, the real smile, the one that changed his whole face. Good, that's good. We stood there in the June sunshine. The whole world spread out before us, clean and new and full of possibility. What happens now? He asked. I don't know. Live, build, make something good. Sounds like a plan. We drove back to the ranch together. Carmen had made dinner. Mateo and Lily were setting the table. Thomas and the others were there too. The families who'd come to help. The friends who'd stood guard. The community we'd built in the middle of war. That night we ate together, laughed, told stories, made plans for planting and building and all the ordinary things that people do when they're not fighting for their lives. And I thought about me, about how she'd waited 15 years for family to come home, how she'd died alone but left behind everything we needed to win, how her stubborn love across decades had saved us all. I raised a glass, to me, to William, to Laura, to everyone who fought and lost so we could fight and win. Everyone raised their glasses, echoed the toast, and in that moment, surrounded by people I loved and land I'd protected and a future I'd earned, I finally felt it. Peace. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of purpose, the knowledge that the fight had mattered, that the sacrifices meant something, that good people standing together could beat powerful men standing alone. The war wasn't over. There would be a trial, testimony, justice delayed but finally coming, but the battle was won, the land was safe, the water was free. And I was home, really home, not just living in a house on land I'd bought, but part of something bigger, part of a legacy, part of a family, part of a community worth fighting for. Me had been right in her last letter. She'd said the truth was a weapon, and it was, the most powerful weapon of all because lies required constant maintenance, constant threats, constant violence, but truth just sat there, quiet, patient, waiting for someone brave enough to speak it. And we'd won. The ranch stood solid against the prairie night, lights in the windows, smoke from the chimney, voices and laughter inside, everything me had wanted, everything my grandfather had died protecting, everything my mother had sacrificed to save. It was ours now, and we weren't letting go. The trial began on the first Tuesday in August. The courthouse in Billings was packed, every seat filled, people standing in the aisles, news cameras outside, reporters asking questions, the whole state watching to see if a man like Roy Dalton could finally be brought down. I sat in the front row with Carmen and Jax. Henry sat at the prosecutor's table as a witness consultant. The state attorney general himself was handling the case. That's how big it had gotten. That's how many people Dalton had hurt over the years. Dalton sat at the defense table in an expensive suit looking smaller than I remembered, thinner, older, but his eyes were still cold, still calculating, still convinced he could win even now. The prosecution took 3 days to present their case. They called Marcus Webb first. He walked to the stand slow, sick, dying but determined. He told everything: the wine, the digitalis, the staged car accident, the barn fire, the 40 years of violence and death. His voice never wavered, never hesitated, just truth delivered like a hammer. The defense tried to break him, called him a liar, a drunk, a man looking for attention in his final days, but Marcus had evidence, photos, receipts, documents, and his testimony matched Roberto's notes exactly, matched the autopsy reports, matched everything. They called Robert Whitehorse next. Jax's uncle walked to the stand looking terrified but standing straight. He confirmed Marcus's story, added details, named other victims, described how Dalton had built an empire on stolen land and murdered families. The defense attacked him too, called him unstable, unreliable, a drunk who'd do anything for money. But Robert had the receipts, the purchase orders, the financial records showing exactly when and how Dalton had paid for the wine that killed my grandfather. They called me on day 3. I swore to tell the truth and sat in that wooden chair and looked out at a courtroom full of strangers and told them about finding my grandmother's letters, about the bunker, about William's journal, about everything me and my grandfather had left behind to make sure the truth survived even if they didn't. The prosecutor asked me to read one of me's letters out loud. I chose the one dated April 2008, 8 years after my mother died, 15 years of searching, still hoping. My dearest Laura, I read, I don't know where you are. I don't know if you'll ever read this. But I'm writing anyway because somewhere in the world you're alive and I need you to know I forgive you. Whatever happened, whatever made you leave, it doesn't matter. Come home. Please come home. Your mother, me. My voice broke on the last words. The courtroom was silent. I looked at the jury, saw tears on some of their faces, saw anger on others, saw the moment they understood this wasn't just about property or money. It was about families, about a grandmother who died waiting, a mother who died running, a grandfather who died trying to protect what should have been free. The defense didn't cross-examine me. What could they say? The letters were real, the evidence was overwhelming, the pattern undeniable. The defense case lasted one day. Dalton's lawyers tried to claim he was innocent, that Marcus and Robert were lying, that there was no proof of murder, that the deaths were coincidental, that 40 years of convenient accidents meant nothing. But they couldn't explain the digitalis levels, couldn't explain the pharmacy receipts, couldn't explain why 12 families all sold their land to Dalton within 2 years of suspicious deaths, couldn't explain the pattern. Dalton never testified. His lawyers wouldn't let him, probably knew he'd confess under pressure, probably knew his rage would show, probably knew a jury would see exactly what he was, a man who'd killed for water and power and money and felt no remorse. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, came back with a verdict at 4 in the afternoon on the 5th day of trial. We, the jury, find the defendant Roy Dalton guilty of murder in the first degree in the death of William Tate, guilty of conspiracy to commit murder in the death of Laura Tate, guilty of manslaughter in the deaths of 3 children in the Martinez fire, guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted, people cheering, crying, hugging, decades of fear and silence breaking open all at once. I sat there feeling numb. It was over, really over. The man who'd killed my grandfather was going to prison for the rest of his life. Henry leaned over the railing, touched my shoulder. "Justice," he said quietly, finally. The judge sentenced Dalton 3 weeks later. Life in prison without possibility of parole for William's murder. Additional consecutive sentences for the other crimes. The numbers added up to more years than Dalton had left to live. He'd die in prison. That was guaranteed. As they let him out, he looked at me one last time. I expected anger, hatred, threats, but what I saw was emptiness, like something inside him had finally broken, like he'd realized too late that all the land and water and power in the world meant nothing if you ended up alone in a cell. I didn't feel sorry for him, but I didn't feel triumph either, just tired and ready to go home. The ranch changed after that. Word spread about the free water, about the trust me had created, about a girl who'd fought a cattle baron and won. People started coming, not many at first, just a few. A widow who'd lost her house and had nowhere to go, a veteran who couldn't sleep indoors but needed a place to be, a family passing through with car trouble and no money for repairs. We took them all in. Carmen cooked. Mateo helped with repairs. Lily made them feel welcome with her drawings and questions and infectious joy. And slowly the ranch became something more than just a place I owned. It became a community, a refuge, a home for people who needed one. We fixed up the bunkhouse, added beds, put in a wood stove, made it livable. Thomas stayed permanently, said he'd found his purpose watching over the place, watching over us. Other veterans came and went. Some stayed a few days, some a few months. All of them helped with the work. All of them left a little stronger than they'd arrived. We planted gardens, big ones, vegetables and herbs and flowers. Carmen knew how to grow things, how to coax life from soil. The food we grew fed everyone, and what we didn't eat we sold at the farmer's market in town, made enough money to buy supplies, to help the next person who showed up needing help. Jax built a workshop in the barn, taught people how to work with wood, how to fix things instead of throwing them away, how to create with their hands. Men who'd been broken by war or life or bad luck found peace in sawdust and lumber and the satisfaction of building something that would last. The small ranchers in the valley thrived with free water. Cattle grew fat. Fields grew green. Families who'd been barely surviving started to prosper. And they remembered who'd fought for that water, remembered me's sacrifice, remembered that a girl with nothing had stood up to a man with everything and won. They helped us in return, brought hay when we needed it, helped with fence repairs, shared equipment, taught me things about ranching that you can't learn from books. We became part of the valley in a way that felt earned, real, permanent. Pearl reopened her feed store, said she couldn't retire after all. Too much work to do, too many people depending on her. She hired Mateo part-time, taught him the business, treated him like the grandson she'd never had, and she stopped being angry, stopped fighting the inevitable, started accepting that some things were worth the risk. One afternoon in early September, she pulled me aside while I was buying chicken feed. I was wrong about a lot of things, but I was right about one. "What's that?" "Jax," she looked at me with those sharp eyes. "He's in love with you. Has been since the day he met you. Don't make him wait too long." "I'm not making him wait." "Aren't you? You're building a life here, a good life, but you're doing it alone. Let him be part of it." "He is part of it." "Not the way he wants to be." Pearl put her hand on mine. "Some men don't know how to say what they feel, they just show it, through actions, through loyalty, through staying when anyone else would have left." She paused. "That's what love looks like in my family. In his family, don't wait for words. The actions are enough." That night I found Jax in the workshop. He was making something, sanding it smooth, concentrating with that focus he brought to everything. I watched him for a minute, the way his hands moved over the wood, the way his hair fell forward over his face, the way he existed in the world with such quiet certainty. "What are you making?" He looked up, smiled slightly. "Come see." I walked over. It was a sign, hand-carved. Letters burned into the wood with careful precision. Triple Creek Ranch, S. 1923, the water keeper's house. "For the gate," he said, "when you're ready." "It's beautiful." Thought it was time. Place has a name now, has a purpose, should announce it. I traced the letters with my finger. The water keeper's house. Me would love that. "She left you more than land. She left you a mission. Protect the water, protect the people. You're doing both." "We're doing both." He set down the sandpaper, looked at me. "Are we?" "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm here every day, working, building, standing beside you, but I don't know where I fit, if you want me to fit." "Of course I want you here." "Here, but not with you, not really." He stepped closer. "I'm not good with words, Cassidy. Never have been, but I need to know. Am I just helping, or am I something more?" My heart was pounding. "You're more. You've always been more." "Then say it out loud, so I know I'm not imagining it." "I love you." The words came out quiet but sure. I love you and I want you here, not just helping, not just working, here with me, as family, as partner, as whatever we decide to be." He reached out, touched my face. His hand was rough from work but gentle. That's all I needed to hear. He kissed me, soft at first, then deeper, and I felt something settle in my chest, something that had been restless and uncertain finally finding its place. We'd been circling this for months, dancing around feelings neither of us knew how to name, but now it was simple, clear, real. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "I want to stay, not just for now, forever. Build this place with you, build a life with you, if you'll have me." "I'll have you." He smiled, the real smile, the one that changed everything. Good, because I wasn't planning on leaving anyway. But before I could celebrate that moment, before we could plan a future together, the world had one more test for us. It arrived the next morning in the form of a man in an expensive suit driving a car too clean for ranch roads. He introduced himself as David Chen, vice president of Western Mining Consortium, and he had an offer that would test everything I believed about what me had left me. We sat on the porch. Carmen brought coffee, then disappeared to give us privacy. Chen opened a leather briefcase and pulled out documents that looked official and expensive and very well prepared. "Miss Tate, I'll be direct. We've been following your case. The trial. The Water Rights Trust. Very impressive work." He smiled like a predator pretending to be friendly. "We'd like to make you an offer for drilling rights to the aquifer beneath your property. It's not for sale. Everything has a price." He slid a paper across the table. $20 million, cash, deposited in your account today. You keep the land. We simply lease the water extraction rights for 25 years. Very fair, very generous. I looked at the number. 20 million. More money than I could imagine. More money than anyone in my family had seen in 100 years. Enough to never worry about taxes or repairs or feeding people again. Enough to help hundreds of people. Thousands maybe. Enough to change everything. What would you do with the water? Industrial use primarily. Our mining operations 60 miles east require massive amounts of water for processing. We drill deep wells on your property. Extract approximately 500,000 gallons per day. Very efficient, very profitable for everyone. 500,000 gallons every day. For you too, of course. He smiled wider. 20 million is just the signing bonus. You'd receive ongoing royalties. 2% of extraction value. Could be another 5 to 10 million over the life of the contract. What happens to the aquifer? Chen's smile faltered slightly. That's where I need to be honest with you. Our geological surveys indicate that extraction at that rate would lower the aquifer pressure significantly. Over time, 5 years perhaps, maybe 7. And the creeks that feed the ranches in this valley. They would diminish eventually, but that's the natural cycle of aquifers. Water tables fluctuate, it's normal. Would they run dry? He looked at his papers, didn't meet my eyes. Within 7 to 10 years, yes. The surface creeks would likely cease flowing. The aquifer itself would recover eventually. In 50 years, maybe 100. But the underground pressure system your grandfather discovered would be fundamentally altered. So you want to pay me $20 million to destroy the water that 300 families depend on, to turn this valley into a dust bowl, to undo everything my grandmother spent 60 years protecting. That's a rather dramatic interpretation. Is it? You just told me the creeks would run dry, that ranches would lose their water, that the aquifer would take a century to recover. How is that dramatic? Chen leaned back. Miss Tate, you're young. You've been through a difficult time. I understand that. But let me give you some perspective. That $20 million could change your life, could help thousands of people, could fund schools and hospitals and programs that would benefit far more people than a few hundred ranchers who are barely scraping by anyway. Those ranchers are my neighbors, my community, the people who helped me when I had nothing. And you could help them, give them money, buy them new land somewhere else, somewhere better. There is nowhere better. This is their home. This water is what makes it possible. Chen's friendly mask slipped. His voice went cold. You're making a mistake. $20 million doesn't come along often, especially not to people like you. People like me. Poor, uneducated, desperate. You could take this money and live like a queen for the rest of your life. Or you can stay here and struggle and watch this place fall apart around you like it did to your grandmother. He stood up. Think about it. You have 48 hours. After that, the offer expires and we pursue other options. What other options? There are always other options, other properties, other water sources, but this would have been easier for everyone. He left, drove away in his clean car down the dirt road, and I sat there holding a piece of paper that said $20 million and feeling sick to my stomach. Carmen came out. She'd been listening from the kitchen window. What are you going to do? I don't know. Yes, you do. I looked at her. $20 million, Carmen. We could help so many people. By destroying the water that helps 300 families right now, by turning this valley into a desert. She sat down beside me. When you saved Lily in that blizzard, you didn't calculate whether it was worth it. You didn't think about costs and benefits. You just did what was right. This is different. Is it, or is it just harder because the numbers are bigger? I thought about it all night, couldn't sleep. Kept seeing that number, 20 million. Kept thinking about all the good we could do, all the people we could help, all the problems we could solve. But I also thought about me, about her letters, about her fight to protect this water, about the trust she'd created specifically to keep it free, about my grandfather's journal entries warning against men who wanted to control it, about 40 years of Dalton trying to take it and failing and what that meant. In the morning, I found Jax feeding chickens, told him about the offer. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then, what do you want to do? I want to take the money. I want to be practical. I want to help people. But that's not what me would do. That's not what my grandfather died protecting. That's not what this place is supposed to be. Then you already know your answer. Do I? He looked at me. You told me this place has a purpose, to protect the water, to protect the people. You can't do one without the other. If you sell the water, you destroy the community. And if you destroy the community, the money doesn't matter. What if I'm making a mistake? What if $20 million could do more good? Could, maybe, but definitely it would do harm. 300 families would lose their water. This valley would die. That's not maybe. That's certain. He was right. I knew he was right. But it was still the hardest decision I'd ever made. When Chen called that afternoon, I had my answer ready. I'm not selling. Miss Tate, please reconsider. $20 million. The answer is no. The water stays free. The community stays protected. That's what this land is for. You're making a serious mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. He hung up angry. I sat there feeling the weight of the decision settle onto my shoulders. I just turned down $20 million, turned down financial security for life, turned down the easy answer. But I'd kept my promise to me, and that was worth more than any amount of money. Jax found me that evening sitting under the cottonwood tree. He sat down beside me. You okay? I just turned down $20 million. I know. Am I crazy? No, you're exactly whom he hoped you'd be. A stubborn fool. A woman who knows what matters. He pulled out a small wooden box, opened it. Inside was a ring, simple, silver, handmade, with tiny engravings of cottonwood leaves around the band. It was my grandmother's, he said. She wore it for 60 years. When she died, my mother gave it to me, said I'd know when I met the right person. Are you asking me to marry you? Yes, he took the ring out, held it up. I'm asking you to marry me, to build this life together, to keep fighting for what matters, to keep the water free and the door open and the light burning. Will you? I held out my hand. Yes. He slid the ring on. It fit perfectly. Like 60 years of his grandmother's love had shaped it to match my finger exactly. We set a date for late October, after harvest, after the first frost, when the work slowed down enough that we could take a day to celebrate. We kept it small, just family and close friends. Henry would officiate. He said it was an honor to marry William Tate's granddaughter to a man worthy of her. The day arrived clear and cold and beautiful. We stood under the cottonwood tree where I'd stood so many times before, alone, scared, wondering if I could survive. Now I stood with Jax, surrounded by people who'd become family, ready to promise forever. Henry spoke about legacy, about what it means to honor the dead by living fully, about me and William and Laura and all the people who'd fought to protect this place, about water and community and the things that truly matter, about two people choosing to build something together that would last beyond their own lives. Jax and I said our vows, simple words, honest promises, to love and protect and stand together, to keep fighting for what matters, to build a life worth living, to honor the land and water and people who made it all possible. Carmen cried. Lily threw flower petals. Mateo stood with Jax as his best man, looking so much older than the scared boy who'd crashed in a blizzard 2 years ago. Pearl brought cake. Ruth brought champagne. Thomas played guitar. And we danced in the yard as the sun set and the stars came out and the prairie wind blessed us with its wild freedom. That night Jax and I walked the property line, checking fences, checking gates, just being together in the quiet after a loud, joyful day. We stopped at the eastern corner, the place where 3 creeks converged underground, where the water that had caused so much death now flowed eternal and free. Your grandfather knew what he was protecting, Jax said. This water will feed families for 100 years, maybe more. Me knew too. That's why she fought so hard, why she never gave up. And now you know. He pulled me close. What are you going to do with that knowledge? Keep protecting it. Keep sharing it. Keep making sure no one else can do what Dalton tried to do, or what that mining company wanted to do. How? By teaching people, by showing them there's another way, by building something here that proves community works, that sharing works, that caring about each other matters more than money or power or convenience. He kissed the top of my head. That's a good purpose. It's the only purpose that matters. We walked back to the house hand in hand. Inside, lights burned warm and golden. I could see Carmen washing dishes, Thomas reading to Lily, Mateo doing something at the kitchen table, our family, our community, our life. This is what me wanted, I said. Not just me coming home, but this, people living here, thriving here, belonging here. You gave that to them. We gave that to them, all of us, together. Spring came again and with it new growth. The snow melted. The creeks ran high and fast. The grass turned green, and the ranch exploded with activity. We planted 10 acres of vegetables, built a greenhouse, added more chickens and goats, started a small dairy. everything we needed to be self-sufficient and help others at the same time. People kept coming. Word had spread beyond the valley, stories in newspapers, segments on TV. The girl who fought a cattle baron and won. The girl who turned down $20 million to protect her community. The ranch that offered free water and second chances. We became a symbol, a story, a reason for people to believe that fighting mattered, that choosing right over easy was possible. Some came for a few days, some a few weeks, some stayed. We never turned anyone away who was willing to work, willing to contribute, willing to be part of something bigger than themselves. The ranch could hold 30 people comfortably. Sometimes we had 40. It was crowded, loud, chaotic, but it was alive. 3 years after I bought the ranch for $50, I stood at the gate and hung the sign Jax had made. Triple Creek Ranch, S 1923, the water keeper's house. The letters carved deep, burned dark, built to last. Cars slowed when they passed now. People stopped to read the sign. Some honked, some waved. Some pulled in asking if we needed help or had work available or just wanted to hear the story. And we welcomed them because that was our purpose. To be the place where the light was always on, where the door was always open, where people who had nothing could find something, where broken things could heal. I thought about the girl I'd been 3 years ago, 18, homeless, alone, standing in a county courthouse bidding $50 on land nobody wanted. I thought about how lost I'd been, how scared, how convinced I'd fail. And I thought about who I'd become, not just older, not just married, but rooted, grounded, part of something that mattered, part of a legacy that stretched back 100 years and would stretch forward 100 more. Me's last birthday card to me was still in the bunker, the one for my 18th birthday. I went down there sometimes when I needed to remember, needed to feel connected to the grandmother I'd never met. The card sat on the shelf next to William's journal and Laura's diary, the whole history of our family preserved in this underground room. I picked up the card, read it again. Happy 18th birthday, Cassidy. You're a woman now, old enough to find your way home. I've left everything for you. The money, the letters, the land, it's all waiting. Please come home. I don't have much time left, but I'll hold on as long as I can. I love you. I've always loved you, Grandma Me. She'd written those words 3 months before she died, holding on, hoping, believing against all evidence that I'd find my way here, and I had, too late to meet her, too late to thank her, but not too late to honor what she'd built, what she'd protected, what she'd left behind. I'm home, Grandma, I said to the empty room, and I'm not leaving. I'm keeping the promises you made, protecting the water, protecting the land, keeping the light on for everyone who needs it. I climbed back up the stairs into sunshine, closed the hatch, covered it with fresh hay, the secret safe, the history preserved, the truth protected for whoever came after me. Because that was the thing about legacy. It wasn't just what you inherited, it was what you passed on, and I was determined to pass on something good, something true, something worth fighting for. That evening we gathered for dinner like we did every night. 32 people around tables in the big dining room we'd built. Food shared, stories told, laughter rising and falling like music. This was family now, not the family I was born into, the family I'd chosen, the family that had chosen me back. Carmen stood to say grace, bless the food, bless the hands that grew it, bless the land that provided it, bless the water that made it all possible, and bless the community that made life worth living. Amen, we all said together. As we ate, I looked around the table, at Jax beside me, at Carmen and Mateo and Lily, at Thomas and the veterans, at the young couple who'd arrived last week running from trouble, at the old woman who'd lost her husband and found purpose helping in the kitchen, at all these people who'd been strangers and became family. This was what victory looked like. Not courtrooms and verdicts, not villains arrested and empires destroyed, not even turning down $20 million, just ordinary people sharing a meal, just community built one person at a time, just home. After dinner, I walked outside. The sun was setting, painting the prairie gold and orange and red. The grass moved in waves. The creek sang its eternal song. The wind carried the scent of sage and earth and growing things. I thought about all the people who'd stood on this land before me, the ones who'd built it, the ones who'd protected it, the ones who'd died for it, and I made them a promise. I won't let this place die. I won't let your sacrifices be forgotten. I'll keep fighting, keep building, keep proving that good people standing together can beat bad people standing alone. I'll keep the water free, keep the door open, keep the light burning in the window so that anyone lost or scared or alone knows they have a place to come home to. I'll teach the next generation what you taught me, that some things are worth fighting for, that community matters more than profit, that the land and water and people are all connected, and when you protect one, you protect them all. And I'll make sure your story lives on, not as tragedy, but as triumph, as proof that love endures, that justice comes, that stubborn hope and fierce determination can change the world. Jax came out to stand beside me, slipped his hand into mine. What are you thinking about? Everything, the past, the future, how we got here, where we're going. And I think we're exactly where we're supposed to be. He squeezed my hand, doing exactly what we're supposed to do. Yeah. We stood there until the sun disappeared and the stars came out, billions of them, stretching forever, the same stars me had looked at, the same stars William had seen in Vietnam, the same stars Laura had wished on when she was pregnant and scared, the same stars that had watched over this land for thousands of years and would keep watching long after we were gone. But for now, for this moment, this was ours, this land, this water, this life, this chance to build something that mattered, this opportunity to honor the dead by living fully, by fighting fiercely, by loving deeply, by keeping the promises they'd made and couldn't keep themselves. I am Cassidy Tate. I am 21 years old. 3 years ago I had nothing, no family, no home, no future. I was a girl who'd aged out of the foster system with $50 and a dream of belonging somewhere. Today I have everything. A husband, a family, a ranch, a community, a purpose. I am the water keeper, the promise keeper, the door that's always open, the light that's always on. And I'm not special. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who refused to quit, who stood up when it would have been easier to stay down, who fought when it would have been safer to run, who believed that one person with nothing could stand against a man with everything and win, who chose community over $20 million because some things matter more than money. If you're listening to this story, if you've made it this far, I want you to know something. You're not too broken to be saved. You're not too lost to find your way home. You're not too old or too young or too damaged or too alone. Someone out there is waiting for you. Maybe they're looking for you right now. Maybe they've been looking for years the way me looked for me. Maybe they've left a light on just in case you find your way there. Don't give up, keep moving, keep looking. Your home is out there, your family is waiting, your purpose is calling. And when you find it, when you finally arrive at that place where you belong, fight for it, protect it, build it into something that lasts, make the hard choices, choose what's right over what's easy, choose community over money, choose legacy over convenience. Because the world needs more places where broken people can heal, where lost people can be found, where ordinary people can do extraordinary things just by refusing to quit. Keep the water free, keep the door open, keep the light burning. That's how we survive, that's how we heal, that's how we win. Together,